Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Rogue's Chat. Today, I have another really special guest. I've been hoping to speak to Jay for quite a while. You may know him from his channel where he makes thoughtful discussion videos on various games and topics. Do you want to just introduce yourself?
My name is Jay from the So Says Jay channel. I like to talk about mostly Assassin's Creed games on my channel. I've been doing it for a couple years now, a few years now. I also generally try to branch out into other stealth games when I can, or just other topics that come to my mind whenever they do. But Assassin's Creed has generally been the main thing I've been talking about.
Mm-hmm. And with that in mind, like, how did you get into Assassin's Creed? Like, what was the process for you? How did you discover that series, and what made you want to play it?
Yeah, well, I don't want to date myself too much, but when I was a little kid, I would mostly play licensed games, which I think is kind of a common thing.
Mm-hmm.
For most of my childhood, playing games was based around licensed things. And then the first time I had ever played a game that wasn't a licensed product that I bought because I saw the movie or the book was Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time.
Oh yes.
And I was quite young at that time. So it was a very hard game for me back then, not because of necessarily the platforming or the combat, but just because I kept getting lost.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me years to actually beat it, which is kind of funny now because you look back and I'm like, that's a very easy game, kind of by comparison to other stuff that has come out in the genre. But, at the time, it was this really big thing that I was sinking years into. Um, and so a few years later, since I was then pretty well acquainted with Ubisoft because I liked Prince of Persia, that sent me over the Splinter Cell. I had played Beyond Good and Evil, a lot of different Ubisoft things at that point when Ubisoft was fairly different in the kind of output it had.
Mm-hmm.
I had heard about Assassin's Creed and I didn't immediately want to pick it up because it just seemed kind of weird to me. Like so much of the advertisements were based around the sci fi aspect of it,
Yeah, yeah.
which was cool, but I feel like in the ads it looked kind of weird. Like I read about the hidden blade, and back then I remember thinking in my head, just based on the description, it must be like those mantis arms from Cyberpunk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was like the first image that came to my head, like, oh, this blade hidden in the arm, that sounds weird. Um, and then a couple years later, around when the trailers for 2 came out, the 2 trailers were a lot less focused on the sci-fi.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And I don't mean to say I dislike the sci-fi, it's just that I couldn't really get a hold on what they were doing with it, with the first game,
I
with
hear you.
the way it was advertised.
Yeah, like Assassin's Creed 1 in particular was, looking at all the marketing at the time, it seemed like such an esoteric thing. So I also had that similar experience where I was like, I don't really know what this is. I was very curious about it. I knew that it was from the
Yeah.
people who made Prince of Persia. That to me was the biggest selling point as well.
hmm Yeah, yeah. And so kind of 2007 passed, 2008 mostly passed, and I hadn't really touched it. And then I realized this was mostly historical fiction, right? And that the sci fi tinge was something I was looking up more and kind of understanding better. And so, again, dating myself, went over to the Blockbuster video, picked up Assassin's Creed 1, had my 2 weeks with it, played through it, got all the flags, killed all the Templars, really liked it, played through all of Assassin's Creed 2 because that came out immediately after, again, through Blockbuster video. And then from then on, Brotherhood and all the way to now, I've been following the series pretty religiously. And so it's been a big part of my life for that whole time.
That's really cool. That is remarkably similar to the almost the exact arc that I've had as well. Really, really
Yeah.
cool. I remember at the time when Brotherhood came out, I was at Blockbuster Video to pick up the game the day of release, and the lady at the counter asked me if I was old enough to play the game, and I actually wasn't by like one
hmm
year, but I lied to her, and she gave it to me anyway, and that's a very fond
hmm
memory I have.
That takes courage.
Yeah.
It's
Just
nice hearing that you had a similar arc because obviously I like the fact that so many people come from different places when they play these games, but I've been surprised at how many different places those are. Like I hear
Mm-hmm.
about people who are so engaged with the mechanics of classic AC, and it feels like they've been doing it forever, and then they tell me, "Oh yeah, no, I got into it like last year."
Yeah, that has
That's
surprised
I
me as
think that's really
well.
cool.
Yeah, same. Some of the players who are super super just technical and really get into like the nitty gritty of classic AC mechanics. Yeah, same idea. Like I would have expected most of them to be quite long time players, but some of them are very recent and they've just happened to delve incredibly deeply in a short amount of time. And I think part of the reason why that's possible is just because we document things better now than we used to. And so, if you are the kind of player who really wants to be able to do that, like those resources are there for you in a way that they haven't always been. And I think that's really, really great.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely remember. I think for me, pre-Unity, so much of the information I would get if I wanted to explore what was happening mechanically would be on forums.
Yes,
And I don't
like,
remember it being so big on YouTube in
mm-hmm.
that era.
Definitely forums was more of where that was situated. I remember places like AC Maps, like the Hidden Blade,
Mm-hmm.
Game Facts, right? Like those kind of places. Certainly,
Yeah.
much more information would be localized to places like that. And then once more creators started uploading things to YouTube, I think it became this, because YouTube is obviously a more, how would I say, like it's certainly not a forum, right? It's kind of like an everything platform. And
Yeah.
so it's a lot more compelling and tempting to kind of democratize the sharing of information in that regard, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I do appreciate how easy it has become to access that information and how kind of clear it has become where you can get reliable information, I'd say, when it comes to things like mechanics, which isn't something that I delve into much on my channel, but everybody who asks me, like if I do want to explore this, where can I go? There are always places I can point them. And I do think that your channel was probably one of the first ones where I had drifted away a little bit from forums and started watching. And again, that would be around Unity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when it comes to actually being able to watch videos that were voiced about all this stuff.
Yeah, because for the longest time, even on forums, we would embed videos sometimes, but they would
Hmm.
basically be um, informational or demonstrative clips that didn't really have voice on them. Um, they might sometimes have YouTube annotations. Do you remember annotations?
I do. I do.
Yes. I miss annotations. I thought they were such a clever concept.
I
Um,
miss them too. I wish there were more ways to direct people certain places at specific points.
mhm. But yeah, you're definitely right. Like voiced videos, discussions, guides, like that's something that is a relatively recent phenomenon in the grand scheme of like AC's lifespan, for sure.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting talking about that because I have, listened to some of these other talks that you've done. And, you're talking about people who engage with that and talk about that. Whereas on my end, so much of what I was doing up until fairly recently, around when Valhalla came out, was really just observing um, and watching, but really enjoying that perspective. And I think that's really all I try to do on my channel, since I don't feel like I have any particular aspect of the franchise or gaming in general that I have expertise on. It's just I'm older, we're older a little bit than
Mm-hmm.
some of the other people on the platform these days.
Yeah.
Just pure observation, pure having seen how things were, how people perceive things now versus how people perceive things then, and just kind of having a chat about it and just happening to record it.
Yeah, I think there's really like space for that kind of experience. And I think that, you've certainly been noticing that yourself. I mean, people appear to really like what you do. I really like what you do. So thank you for doing it. I think it's really valuable. I think it's important to have this kind of more chill discussion style, you know, videos. that there are not too many places where I would have found such work before, I don't think.
And that is kind of you, and that is what I try to do there. Because, I mean, I don't have a huge audience, but I have a nice group of people who seem to like to listen when I put something out. And, just the ability to be able to do that and to have people comment and to be able to respond and to be able to talk about a franchise that I like, which is, I think, an aspect of the whole thing that can get lost, especially because of how
Yes.
divisive the franchise is.
Yes.
Whether or not the person talking about it is talking about it out of a sense of enjoyment or out of a sense of frustration or anger or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, a lot of these games, I think, have more, issues, or I have more issues with than positives. A fair chunk of them. But
I
at
would
the same
agree.
time, like,
Yeah,
I really do enjoy these games. I grew up with them,
same.
right? And that's just a thing about it. Like, that's why Assassin's Creed is what I talk about. I've talked about my PlayStation account, and I think I've got like 160 something games on there, which isn't, huge, but it's a fair amount. If I had to assume, or if I had to guess, maybe I've played 200 games in my life, and Assassin's Creed makes up less than 20 of that. But it was just such a formative franchise for me, and it's one where I really was there, um, being as observant as I could. I remember getting home every single day in 2012 and just typing in for news about Assassin's Creed 3 because I
Yep.
was just at an
Yep.
age where that's what I was doing, right? And so even though maybe I've sunk more hours into other franchises, or I may even consider myself better or more informed on other franchises, Assassin's Creed is the one that I was just there for every step of the way, and I've had an opinion every step of the way, and so that's kind of why it's become such an important part of what I talk about.
I relate to that so much. Like this concept you brought up of like, yes, it's, riddled with issues. Like no one can claim any of these games are flawless by any means, like not even close. But there's just something special about them that like makes you want to forgive them and makes you want to love them and makes you want to see them reach their potential, which I don't think they ever really have. And I don't know. I think maybe you might agree with me.
Yeah, and that's definitely a big topic of discussion, right? That's one that people have brought up a lot,
Mm-hmm.
both on my channel and, in discussions I've had on Discord of, I think I've always had that perspective of the first Assassin's Creed games felt so much to me like a starting point.
Yeah.
And so in my video on AC2, I talk about the fact that, it's my favorite Assassin's Creed game, but it's kind of frustrating that it is my favorite Assassin's Creed game because it feels like we should have moved a little further than that by 2009,
Yeah.
or since 2009. And obviously, there's so many things about Assassin's Creed 1 that make it unique from the others, so many things about the Ezio trilogy that make it unique, and seeing how many pathways were opened up back then that just weren't really followed up on,
Yes.
I think is a
Yes.
point of frustration for a lot of people. And I think it's a point of frustration when people don't acknowledge the extent to which there were all those pathways open, like
Yeah.
all the things that were great about those old games that, if you dig past some of the more frustrating aspects of them, you could really open up a lot of stuff there. And that doesn't always get acknowledged.
Definitely. Yeah, no, there was something really special about them. And yeah, I totally see how players and viewers can get frustrated when, they're discussing things with each other online and, we're trying to convey like, hey, this is why we love this is why this is special. It can definitely be a little irritating from time to time when, that doesn't always feel heard, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just getting stranger and stranger as the franchise expands. And there are so many other niche things that people enjoy about it that
Mm-hmm.
might have nothing to do with what was good about the
Yeah.
early ones.
Yes.
One of the most positive communities of people I've found has been just checking out like people who congregate around Odyssey.
Yeah, I've
Like
noticed that.
just how happy people are to talk about Odyssey and to explore Odyssey and go over all these different things that maybe I wouldn't even really dig into.
Yeah.
But there are so many people who have only played Odyssey, which is a testament both to, how wide of an impact it had, and also how different it is and how unique it is and how kind of separate it can be from the other games. So it goes in both those different directions. But whenever I'm talking to people who are within this community based around Odyssey, they always seem to be having a very good time.
Yeah, I've noticed the same. Like, it's certainly a game that distinguishes itself from the rest of the series, for better and worse, like to a massive degree. But the people who
Hmm.
love Odyssey, like, really, really love Odyssey. Like, it's like their favorite thing, and the
Hmm.
amount of passion there is certainly something to behold.
Yeah, it is. And it's really cool seeing the passion that exists in, all these different games and finding what those subsets of the community are.
Yeah, that's something I've always tried to be kind to the best of my ability, as time has gone on, because obviously, like, I have aspects of Assassin's Creed that I really like, and it's in my best interest to, like, advocate for those and push for those, and you know try to have more of those manifest for me to enjoy over the years. But at the same time, like, I know what it's like to love something and to be a fan of something, and so um, I forget the exact wording I used in some video of mine once upon a time, but basically I said something akin to, I don't want those players to lose what they love either. Like, I think it makes sense that there are those who love and enjoy and are passionate about these new expressions of what Assassin's Creed can be. It may not be my thing. I don't, it's not one of my favorite things in the world, but I respect it and I understand it, and you know, there's there's something to be said for just kind of recognizing the value in that. And I think that for the more reasonable people in the audience, um, how would I phrase this? It's kind of like, I think people would be happier and at peace if we kind of just accepted that we all love like different things. And for the most part, I'm basically unbothered as long as someone doesn't tell me that like the thing that I love is invalid, right? Or
Yeah.
or do so very like aggressively,
Yeah.
which that's what it's all about for me. And
Yeah.
because I hold that perspective, that is kind of what informs the way I like to try treating, these newer games and players who love them. Because yeah, it's just like, how would I feel if I were on the other side of this? Probably not very good,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's definitely something I try to stay cognizant of, especially again because a lot of my content is simpler than yours. I really am just talking about how I feel about certain things, and I try to make sure that it's known that I am just talking about feeling more than anything else and not trying to put in objective fact unless I'm, giving a history lesson at
yeah,
some
or like
point
an
in my videos,
example.
which on occasion I'll do.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. But I think what you're talking about is why I had so many frustrations with Valhalla specifically,
Yes, I
because
remember your
as a
video.
game, yeah, like as I get older, I care less and less, I think, about having expectations for anything in particular when it comes to any kind of media that comes out for
Yeah,
what I want it to be or what I expect. When I was a kid, that wasn't the case, or when I was younger, not even a kid, that wasn't the case. But as I get older and I get busier, I'm willing to meet things where they are a little more.
as long as they're good. Yeah, like,
Exactly, that's exactly it.
hmm,
Yeah.
I
And
can
so
relate to
when
that.
Valhalla came out, I couldn't imagine someone who loved the older games really connecting with it, but I couldn't imagine someone who loved Odyssey or Origins really connecting with it. I felt this sense of confusion as to who exactly the audience was, as
Yeah,
opposed to just the general conglomerate of people who have liked specific things in the games, and so they stick kind of watered down versions in here.
I very
But
much felt the
that's
same. Yeah.
yeah, that was just kind of my feeling on Valhalla was like, who is this for?
It's a game that deeply frustrated me at the time, and even looking back on it now, because it's like there are elements that you can latch onto and resonate with, but they're so infrequent and placed so like sparsely throughout such a big game. I can get some cool narrative moments that I can appreciate as like an older fan. It's a little exhausting when they only arise like every I don't know how many hours, right? And likewise, the the mechanical like crunchiness of something like Odyssey, where like it feels good moment to moment to like press buttons and all that. Like that's not really the case in Valhalla because there's just so much I guess paring back of certain elements. And so it ended up feeling like something that, it hasn't been streamlined enough to the point where, I don't know, like an AC1 to Rev fan can appreciate it for like tight focus or anything, but it also like has lost the, I don't know, just like the loot game and the build crafting and the playstyle customization of something that Odyssey might have had. We're not really getting the best of either world here, like what's going on, right?
Perhaps it's partially a testament to the fact that just the concept of Assassin's Creed is so appealing.
Yeah.
When it comes to both the assassin side of it and also just generally you can go to a different historical setting every single time. Like, no matter how frustrated you get, there's always going to be someone who acts as an audience for the new historical setting that they release.
Yeah, it's why I'm always curious about them and why I always want to check them out.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so airtight as a concept. Like, I don't know that the franchise could have survived without it, but with it, I can see why Ubisoft has thrown so many eggs in there when it comes to just investing in it.
Yeah, for sure. There were a few notes in that, in the last few minutes that I want to touch on, but let me start with what made you want to start uploading videos to YouTube, because it's certainly a step from, kind of being an observer and enjoying that to like, putting in the work to start releasing stuff. I mean, it certainly takes a lot of energy out of me. So what was your path to kind of getting into that?
Yeah, I think, again, with Assassin's Creed and thinking about what kind of discussions are being had about the franchise, I always found myself thinking about the videos I would watch for, whomever would be putting them out. I would consume a lot of Assassin's Creed content. And so I was constantly thinking about, well, what are my opinions compared to what this person is saying? Or how do I feel about this? And I would find myself in the car driving home from work, just like talking to myself as if it were a video, I guess, but just like like talking to myself to vocalize what my own opinions were. And I came to this realization that if I just recorded that, because I like talk for half an hour straight to myself on the car ride home, that would have been a video in of itself. And so one day around when Valhalla was coming out, I just decided, why not? I'm gonna put together a video. I've never done that before. First thing I ever did was just rank the settings, because like I said, I feel like that's the real big pull for a lot of people, especially if they're not familiar with the franchise.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about what I think they did well with the settings, because that's going to be a pretty exclusively positive video, because I think all the settings are well done in their own ways. So I made that video. It took a long time, and I think it took me like 4 or 5 months just to put that together, because I had never done it before, and I don't even remember what software I was using back then. I had a little Meteor mic that, again, kind of like now, I had to record in the dead of night just to make sure no sound got through. But I put that video out and people kind of liked it. They seemed to enjoy it. And so anybody engaging with you and wanting to talk about the thing that you wanted to talk about in the first place does motivate that desire to do more there. And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I figured if I've got that enjoyment of it and it became this fun thing, it became a hobby, might as well keep doing it. And so now once a month, if I can, sometimes I can't, I try to make a video. And I also try not to do more than one a month. I try to keep it as something that is fun, because I don't want it to become something that's harmful in any way, shape, or form. So that's kind of become the routine for the last couple of years. Every month, if I can, I'll put together a video on whatever topic happens to come to my mind, and then I see where it goes.
That's so cool. I love that approach. I think it really works well for you. And, whenever I see one in my subscription box, I'm just like, yeah, like I want to check this out. Especially because, as you mentioned, like Assassin's Creed is obviously not your only interest, right? Like, we care
Mhm.
about more than just this series, like, even though it is a big passion of ours. And so, this is kind of like a two-part question. So, I'll start with part one. What are 2 or 3 games that you love outside of Assassin's Creed? And they can be like anything.
Sure. Sure. 2 or 3 is tough. I mean,
I know, you can say more
I
if you want.
sure. I feel like this is a very basic answer in this day and age,
Okay.
but I can't tear myself away from the FromSoft games a lot of the
Yes,
time.
yes. We
I
understand
love
each
taking
other.
new people through them. Yeah.
Hmm.
I love doing them on my own. I love taking people through them. Um, and just going through those games again, whether it's alone or with other people. Like I just can't get enough of that type of game. It feels so addictive to just be able to experience these things over and over in different ways. And I was literally, I have some friends, we've been playing through like all the FromSoft games over again together. Was literally forcing myself to stop my Millennia runs of the day to make sure I had Discord ready so I could talk to you.
That is awesome.
Uh,
That makes me so happy because I would have brought up From's games as well to, like, chip in my answer to this question.
yeah. So that's probably like the group of games I've spent the most time with in the last few years of my life.
Awesome.
If we talk about earlier in my life, as I had mentioned, Prince of Persia was really formative
Yeah.
for me. Um, Obviously, Ubisoft hasn't had as much interest in it
Yeah.
in different ways, so haven't been able to continue enjoying Prince of Persia, unfortunately. Very glad Lost Crown got to exist. And I have Rogue Prince of Persia in my library, but I haven't been able to play it yet. I look forward to trying that out too. I'd say one of the first franchises I really dug into, like I want to learn everything about this, was probably Metal Gear
Yeah. Metal Gear
back
is
when I was
so
younger.
cool.
Like, I remember there was one summer when I was in high school when I was just like sending a friend of mine screenshots because I was just going through the whole franchise and getting the big boss rank in each one. And so that's a summer where I still have a folder somewhere of me at the age of like 16, posing in front of my CRT television with the big boss rank at the end of each of those games.
Dude, that's
So that was
awesome.
definitely fun.
I love that. I think it's so fascinating that, like, you love Prince of Persia and you love Metal Gear, and, like, I love Prince of Persia and I love Metal Gear, and we both kind of happened upon Assassin's Creed, which is kind of like a weird fusion between the two. Like, it's this kind of
Yeah.
arcadey, like, stealth sci-fi historical, like, melee sword game. I think
Yeah.
that's so cool.
Yeah, it is interesting seeing how all of these interests come together. There's a ton of games out there that have been really formative, but I think those are a few that really stand out to me when it comes to things I've really dug my time into.
Definitely, like, From's games for me have been, in recent years, I would say even a slightly bigger passion than Assassin's Creed proper, which I think is understandable. Just Assassin's Creed hasn't always done, everything that I want and everything I ask of it. And so having these other games that I can love, like, even more because they're so adherent to what they are, I guess you could say, is
Hmm.
really, really special to me. And I love just the vibe of existing in those worlds and the kind of tactics and mindsets that they demand from you and draw out of you. One of the ways I tend to teach beginners to From games to think about them and play them is, I don't know if I've mentioned this elsewhere, but I call it like the adventurer's mindset. And it's basically
Hmm.
this idea of what would you do if you were actually there and, like, you wanted to survive, right?
Yeah.
And for a lot of players, like, they tend to go into these games with, I guess, like, self-imposed rules, like, from the outset. What I really like to encourage, just go into the game, and if something looks cool to you or, like, you want to enjoy using it, feel free to use it. It's there to be experienced and to be enjoyed. And if you want to, like, commit yourself to challenge runs and other such ways of playing later, like, by all means you can do that, like, after you've already enjoyed the experience. One of the things that's always kind of heartbreaking to me is to see new players, like, try these games and sort of be pushed away because they think they have to play them a particular way, right? And you really don't.
Yeah. And I think that ties a lot into a lot of the philosophy I've observed on your channel. Like some of the other talks you've had, like back when you were chatting with Animus Drifter and you talked about intent and gameplay, right?
Yeah.
What the player wants to do, how the player is immersing themselves in a game, and how that isn't something that has to just be in your head. It is something that the developers can build an experience around so that you have the ability to engage with that and to do the things that you want to do if you were there.
Yeah, I think From's games are some of the best at achieving that, and it's something that I always wish I could share with more players.
It's always a wonderful thing to be able to share.
Is there any one in particular that you have like a special affinity for? I know this is a hard question because I probably wouldn't be able to give you the answer to that myself.
I was literally just thinking, should I ask that question or is it too big a question? But now you've asked it of me. I would probably pretty easily say that it is Dark Souls 1 for me still.
Yeah, it's so special.
It does get to the point where when I like games enough, I have to think about less what I love and also what other games perhaps didn't give me that I attach myself to. Just the vibe of Dark Souls 1, the world of Dark Souls 1. Obviously, people talk about the interconnected nature of it and how it wasn't ever fully expanded upon again. There's so much that I love about Dark Souls 2, even. There's so much that I love about 3. I feel like the From games that are always going to get me are the ones that are something I've never seen before.
Yeah.
And despite the similarity of Dark Souls 1 to Demon Souls, it very much is its own thing. Sekiro very much is its own thing. Bloodborne very much is its own thing. And I love all three of those a lot. But Dark Souls 1, to me, is the one where if you told me I had to like no-hit one of these games, that's the one I would try. Just because of my familiarity with it and how just connected I feel to it.
Yeah, like you love it enough that the the process of iterating and refining and failing until you accrued enough experience to do so like wouldn't be that unpleasant.
Yeah, I think so. But again, love for all of them. I mean, I want to go back to Sekiro again. There isn't a single one that I haven't gone back to regularly over the years.
Same. I love them all. I've also enjoyed, especially in recent years, some Soulslikes external to From. I think probably the biggest ones I have praise for would be Lies of P and Khazan. I think Lies of P is definitely like closer to the kind of vibe that you might get from something like a From game. Khazan isn't, but in terms of just mechanics and gameplay and the way it feels in my hands, it's just really, really cool. And I like them both for very different reasons.
Yeah, I've played a lot of Lies of P, but I haven't been able to get to Khazan yet. But I've seen so many people talking about Khazan and just the combat system and the way it kind of sets itself apart from a lot of the From games. It makes me very excited to get into it.
It's really cool. I hope you let me know whenever you do get around to it. I think Khazan is the rare game I've played with like every weapon type, because it has 3 weapon types. It has dual wield, greatsword, and spear. And typically when I play games, I kind of just stick with my one weapon that I love the most, unless I adore the game so much that I play other stuff. In terms of Khazan, like I did actually do a full playthrough with all 3 weapon types, and I enjoyed myself thoroughly like every time.
That is what kind of sold me on the genre of games, like From games back in the day. I remember watching a video with 2 people going through Dark Souls, but one of them had a melee build and one of them had a magic build. And I just thought that's really cool that you can have completely different experiences with the same exact game.
Yeah.
And then I proceeded to like do 5 playthroughs with a melee weapon, so.
Yes.
Only just recently have I started expanding beyond that.
Yeah, sometimes you just find something you really, really love and you just want to keep loving it more, Like, I totally get it. One of the reasons you can have really interesting perspectives about Assassin's Creed is that you do engage with and think about other topics deeply. On your channel, you've discussed The Last of Us, Arkham, Armored Core, Sekiro, fighting games, and even movies across the various videos. I kind of see you as someone who appreciates the medium of games very holistically. I don't think you would describe yourself purely as like just an Assassin's Creed fan, and I think in this conversation I have even more reason to believe so. Would you see yourself as someone who just loves gaming in general?
I definitely adore just the medium as it exists. And there's something really special about being able to be around for so much of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say I was playing Pong back in the day, but like
Yeah, yeah.
so much innovation has occurred within this medium. It is not at all what it was when I was playing Sands of Time as a kid, right? It's not at all what it was when I would be playing like Final Fantasy V
Yeah, yeah.
way back when, right? So like so much has changed and we've been able to be there for it. And not just when it comes to the technological side of things, but also how people talk about video games, how they're discussed, what they do mean to people,
Mm-hmm.
and the kinds of things that will be sticking points within discussion among people who play games and people who don't,
Yeah, it's
right?
very
When,
different now than it was like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right?
yeah. And I can only imagine it'll keep changing so much in the next 10 years. But like, you have these seminal articles that'll kind of come out and be like, the first time people were exposed to the term of ludonarrative dissonance, right? And then that
Yes, yes.
everybody was saying that after that. And so that became what people talk about when
Mm-hmm.
people talk about games for a chunk of time. And just right now, this era that we're in, where people are trying to figure out how we're going to navigate all of these live service games that are coming out, these live service
Yep.
games that are failing, and what that's going to mean for the future of how video games are monetized. I'm not going to dig into all that stuff, but just being there for all that and being there for all that discussion is very meaningful. And so I try to get as wide a range of different games that I play as possible just because I love being able to explore that history in as clear a way as possible. And the fact that so much of that history at this point in time is fairly accessible. It is
Yeah.
becoming less accessible, which is another big point of contention that I'm certainly not the first person to talk about, but accessibility in games and conservation of games is such a big thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
But as someone who loves going back to older games, someone who really still loves playing NES games and still loves playing my PS1 games and playing new PS1 games that I've never played before, it means a lot to me to be able to continue accessing all these things.
Yeah, I really resonate with that, especially this idea of going back to play games from, previous eras that I maybe hadn't checked out at the time or hadn't really engaged with at the time that deeply. For me right now, a genre that I've only recently been getting into and becoming more passionate about is like shoot 'em ups or shmups or STGs, you know,
Yeah.
games like Raiden, like Ikaruga, um, like the Dodonpachi series. Toho is a big one that is quite famous, and so playing these games, on PS1 and a lot of the newer ones that have released on Steam recently as well. Um, I think it's just really interesting and really instructive because these games are very, I don't know, like true to themselves, I guess you could say, and they have a design that is very exacting, and
Hmm.
they're games where you really do have to kind of like come to them. The experience of playing a game like a shmup or like an STG is very different from the experience of playing like, a decompressed RPG or something like that. Games like these typically only have like 5 or 6 stages. Usually there's a boss at the end of each stage. The way they're often discussed is players will play them once and then they'll be like, oh, that was a really short game. That'll be the end of it. But that's not really how you're meant to consume these, right? Like the idea with these kind of games, especially in their communities, is, the elusive one credit clear, right? Like, can you finish the entire game on a single credit, like on a single token, essentially, because they're derived from arcades, right? That's where they were
Hmm.
born and where they came from. And so in the pursuit of trying to get that, the iteration and mastery that you accrue playing each level and each stage, like you do get quite a lot of playtime out of that experience, like if that's something you care to pursue and it's something you really feel yourself getting better at. And I think that's really, really interesting, especially in an age where many games nowadays are really, really long. And,
Yeah.
for me, like, I love a long game as much as the next guy, but sometimes like it's just too much, you know, and I have these curiosities and these wonderings where it's like, what if this was just tighter and more focused? What if this was shorter? Right? Like, is this something I'm gonna be willing to replay? Because when I was younger, one of my favorite things to do, and you know, part of it was because of necessity, and part of it was because of, you know, just actual desire. I really love to replay the games that I already had, and that was something that, you know, was certainly much more possible and much more like encouraged back then because they just weren't excessively long. You know, it wasn't something that would take a prohibitive amount of time to do. You know, if I want to like replay MGS1, I can just replay it and beat it in like a few hours, right? Like it's something that you can kind of just run through. It's something that, you know, today genres like survival horror that have had a resurgence in recent years as well are kind of bringing back. And it's something that I do kind of miss from those older games. You know, like when I ask myself, would I rather replay AC2 or like AC Odyssey, right? Like in a perfect world where I loved both games like equally as much, I would replay AC2 every time because it's not gonna take me like, you know, who knows how many hours to get through.
I mean, I remember when I was younger, when a new Assassin's Creed would come out, what I would do is I would 100% each one that came before it, right?
Yeah.
In the marathon leading up to it. So Brotherhood came out, I did 1 and 2 again, played Brotherhood. Revelations came out, I did 1, 2, Brotherhood, and then played that. But like there was just that ability to say, yeah, I'm just going to play 5 games to 100% in a row over the course of a couple months. And that wasn't this big ask, really.
Yeah, it was something that seemed pretty reasonably done. And that's something I definitely miss, you know, this idea that if you wanted to, you could feasibly experience most, if not all, of what a game had to offer and revisit that and enjoy that all over again. I think
Mhm.
that's really, really cool. And I think that's part of the reason why I do really appreciate games like Souls. They're certainly longer than some games, but they're way shorter than some other games.
Yeah.
And they have this philosophy of like, you know, you can have your replay value in part because you can play with different weapons, you can play with different play styles, right? Like you can use different types of tools more or less. You can, you know, talk to different characters. You can choose to kill some characters outright, which I think is something that is always really, really interesting to me. You know, a lot of these older RPGs, like CRPGs and the like, you know, games like Morrowind, they would straight up let you kill characters, and the most they would do is like put up a little warning on your screen, like, hey, because you've killed this character, you know, you might not be able to finish your main quest anymore. So feel free to like reload your save if you wish, or just play in this doomed world you've created, right? And that's really, really cool. That's something that you don't really see games do anymore, in part because, you know, we need to protect players from an amount of their own decisions. um, but that's something that From's games are, for the most part, like perfectly happy to let you do. Like you can straight up just attack someone and kill them, and not only can you do that, they'll have unique dialogue for being provoked. They'll have unique dialogue for like entering combat with you. They'll drop items that, you know, can speak more about who this person is and their place in the world. And it's these little things where it's like, is every player going to do this? No, probably not. But it's there if you want it. And it's something that, you know, when you do replay this game, even though it's not like, you know, hundreds of hours long by any means, like you can find new ways to enjoy it and new ways to revisit it. And I think over time, I've really started to cherish and appreciate that approach to longevity over just making your first playthrough last like 150 hours, you know?
Yeah, definitely so. I mean, I did feel a lot of that strain in Shadows. And again, like we had talked about before, I'm not saying any of this to try to put down anybody who likes one of these games or another. And Shadows certainly isn't, I'd say, like one of my least favorite Assassin's Creed games.
Mm-hmm.
But I did replay it because, you know, they came out with the DLC. And so I figured, hey, I'll go through some of this again. It's not as long as Valhalla when you just go through the main story.
Yeah.
I did start to wonder, like, when I was first playing it, I was exploring. I was curious. I was trying to see what's around here. one of the things that shocked me about Shadows was getting to the end and realizing just how little there is to find if you explore,
Yeah.
especially given that that is so heavily criticized when it comes to Ubisoft. Like people are always talking about how formulaic they are and how there needs to be a big change, and I would have thought that might have been more at the forefront, I guess, when making the world. But going through it and sitting and doing a quick time event, the horse archery thing again and again and again, assassinations on the assassination board, which I really like, but at a point it's just like there's got to be other stuff to do, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't come from a place of again saying that Shadows is a terrible game as a result of that, because there is stuff that I enjoy about it. It's just when it comes to that open world aspect, I was surprised at how little reason there was to revisit it when I did try going back to it, how
Yeah.
little reason there was for me to explore.
For me, a really great example of that is, and this is something that I've written in my review, which is still forthcoming. When I first started playing the game, I would stumble onto these various citizens throughout the roads that they're either stranded or they're in various states of trouble, and they call out to you, and you can either like donate some resources to them or solve some quick situation for them, and then they'll be grateful to you. They'll have a little bit of dialogue. Maybe they'll give you some intel, right? And so when I first started playing the game during like the opening 5 or so hours, I really enjoyed every single one of those that I stumbled onto, because I was like, wow, this is really cool. It offers me like a very light amount of role playing. I think my character would conceivably like want to help these people, right? Especially because she has experienced tragedy of her own. As the game goes on, and you just keep meeting those same types of people over and over again, that enjoyment kind of fades. And it's nothing wrong with the thing itself. It's just that I don't think anything can stand up under the weight of like so much repetition and such a long game runtime. Even if you were like a god of game design, you would struggle to create the necessary variety and novelty that it would take to keep that feeling interesting over like 100, 200 hours, right? And it's just one of those things that really got me thinking again, as I so often do, would I enjoy this game if it were just shorter? Like if there were just like less time that it needed to fill? And I think the answer is just always going to be yes.
I definitely agree there, both when it comes to time. A lot of the times when I'm playing a game, I think just in general, like, this doesn't need to look this good, even. This doesn't need
Yeah, yeah.
to feel this high budget. Like, there are other places I'm sure could have benefited from that time and effort. Now, I understand, of course, that graphics are a selling point, especially to more casual players.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what that would mean for the bottom line, of course. But as a player, you don't have to think about the bottom line. You can just think about what would be better for me as an experience, what would make a better game. And games are just so overproduced these days
Certainly.
and so difficult to make, even with underpaying their employees, that it's just there's this hope that there will be some big changes in the industry
Definitely.
as a whole.
Yeah, like you just have to wonder, like, is the amount these devs are suffering to like make this like even worth it? Like, would I really have like a much worse experience if this game, you know, looked a little less shiny and was a little
Mhm.
less bloated and had, you know, 4 or 5 fewer features and systems, right? And it's like
Yeah.
most of the time, no, I don't think I would enjoy it any less. Like if anything, I would enjoy it even more. The joke that's not really a joke that I always like to bring up is From Software in Elden Ring uses the exact same door opening animation from Demon Souls, and
Mhm.
it's fine because that simply
Yeah.
doesn't need fixing or changing.
And you see when the leaks came out for Elden Ring before that initial trailer, there were some people who were upset, and that was kind of the knee-jerk reaction of this just looks just like Dark Souls 3. But then once we got past that initial period of all we're seeing is what is the same, right? We got to this point of having Elden Ring come out, and obviously there are criticisms to have about it. There are all sorts of opinions about it, but for the most part, people do appreciate it for what it is, and it is a game that has massively transformed the kind of person who is willing to play those games just because of how mainstream it is and how, in some ways, accessible it is.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
it's very cool to see things like that. And it's cool to see things like the fact that this year, especially, indie games are such a big deal when it comes to what's actually getting recognized and what people are looking at. And obviously, I have no idea what work conditions are like, even when it comes to these smaller games. There is this clear fact that you can get a very full experience out of video games today without ever touching anything that's $70 or up.
Yeah. Yeah. And depending on how cynical you are, you might even make the argument that like those $70 and up experiences are sometimes worse, like especially if you get them, on release before, their technical state and their design has been like proven.
People sometimes ask me what I feel about the state of video games and if I feel like they're better or worse than they've been at any other point. And it's hard to give an answer to something like that.
Yeah.
But I love video games right now as much as I have in any other era. And I think there are just as many fantastic and unique and creative video games coming out right now as there have been in any other era. It's just that, some of them might be found in different places than we would have expected before. And you
Yeah.
might have to look in a different way than you did before. Because, again, if you're talking about me being young and going to Blockbuster in that like early PS3 era, there were definitely a lot of games you pick up for your 2 weeks and you think, I don't know why I did that.
Yeah,
It's
I can name a
not a game I
few.
should have pressed on the cover. This is yet another beige PS3 game.
Yes, yes. I'm sure no one will mind if I put like Terminator Salvation on blast because I
Sure.
I rented that for PS3 and I was like, I don't know about this. Like,
See, like, I can't engage with you on that conversation because I don't know anything about Terminator Salvation. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because I know I rented it.
wow.
I know for a fact I rented that game. Couldn't tell you a thing about it.
Yeah, I don't even know if I got through like mission 2 or whatever it was before I was like, no, I'm taking this back. Like,
A lot to advocate for right now, a lot to criticize right now about the way games are made, but
yeah.
there's just so much really great stuff coming out right now too.
There is for sure. It's something I always get a little bit sad about whenever I see people online, be it on, social media or wherever it may be, saying like, "Oh, there's nothing fun to play. Like there's nothing good to play." And it's like, in my experience, like we're in an era where there is too much fun to play, and I don't have the time and the energy to, give all of it my attention, you know?
Hmm.
Like there's so many cool games that whoever is listening to this like that you would love if you dug around and looked around and asked for recommendations is definitely close to my heart. This idea of I love games now as much as I did back then, I definitely feel that. I resonate with that like a lot. There are a series I wish would be a little bit braver, I guess you could say. Really, mostly it is Assassin's Creed that I would leverage that against. Like, I really just wish Assassin's Creed was a little bit braver, like in general. Whenever it's willing to do the crazy Assassin's Creed stuff, so much more interesting than whenever it's content to just kind of either follow like other games' trends or at worst follow its own trends that it is so afraid to like deviate from,
Hmm.
like when I look at something like Valhalla or even like Shadows, they're different in some ways, but you've mentioned as much on your channel as well. They're not fundamentally different from something like Origins. And so it's very difficult to like escape this feeling of like, I've kind of played this before. Maybe this is just a perception issue. Maybe I'm like biased. I'm fully open to that being the case. But I remember even playing like the first few Assassin's Creed games, like it didn't feel like that. Like the general way Altair and Ezio moved is like similar enough, sure. And you're doing like a lot of similar stuff, but like I cannot say that those are like the same game. The way you would engage with each of those is very different. Even then, like there was divisiveness.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I feel like a lot of people are asking for change, and it's coming in a lot of different directions. right? There are a lot of people who want things to be different in a variety of different ways. I never know what to expect from rumors. I don't really dig into them, but
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what Hexe is going to end up being. Because
Same.
I really have no idea right now.
That is my
It
big
sounds
curiosity.
unique.
Yeah. It's just simply from
Yeah.
the stuff we've heard where it's like it's trying to be something totally different from what came before. When I hear that and when I see that, like I immediately gravitate to that. Like that is what I'm curious about. Like
Hmm.
there are rumors that Black Flag remake is coming or whatever, and truth be told, like I'm sure it'll be a great game in its own right. If I ask myself like do I care more about that or like what Hexa might be doing? Like Hexa is hugely the thing I'm curious about because I really want to see what they mean by, different from what came before. Cuz I've needed different from what came before since like 2016 basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can definitely understand that. And I do agree with you that there have been a lot of different eras of Assassin's Creed where the level of innovation has changed a lot. I really feel Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is a game that is one of the most influential when it comes to how open world games are structured
Yes.
of that era.
You can really
And
feel it.
yeah, I don't feel like I hear that many people talking about it in that way because it's just so similar to AC2, but just the way they structure that world, the way they, approach creating an open world, like this single open world, which was kind of different at the time at least.
Yeah.
I feel like the two games that really made what Ubisoft decided they were going to do forever, it feels like, were Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and then Far Cry 3. Because
Yes.
so much of those two games just continue to resonate in everything that they make, even stuff outside of those two franchises.
Yeah, 100%. Like I've been saying that for years. It's very apparent
Hmm.
when you take a look at them. This vibe of a more or less like contiguous open world, like anchors of gameplay, and then when the player engages with that anchor successfully, it like opens up everything in that area. In Brotherhood, those were Borgia Towers, right? Everything is
Hmm.
anchored around Borgia Towers because they suppress a district, they let you open more businesses, they let you, access more of your mechanics like in that region. You kind of just repeat that loop. And the way they have things set up where in Brotherhood, every quote unquote region is loosely split among, your three factions, right? Like the courtesans, the thieves, and the mercenaries. A lot of open world games today, they more or less follow that kind of structure. Certainly like
Hmm.
inside and to an extent outside of Ubisoft. I mean, one note of criticism that games like Ghost of Tsushima and the Horizon series have received is that aren't these basically just Ubisoft games with like greater production values, right? And it's like to an extent, kind of, yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting to think about because it suggests that this formula, it can work and it can be strong provided the requisite amount of like care and attention and effort is like placed into it. And to be clear, like I don't think just indiscriminate effort and attention is enough. Like it needs to be focused because then you get something like I don't know, like Valhalla or indeed Shadows where I have no doubt that immense care and immense effort went into the creation of both of those games, but
Hmm.
certainly like they're not being lauded the way something like a Horizon is or the way like Ghost of Tsushima is, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely interesting to look at all of those different games and how they do things. And I remember watching someone play through the Hogwarts Legacy game, and I was kind of shocked to see, like, oh, you're going into this camp and you're stealth assassinating everyone, and then you're getting the loot at the end, and then you're going on to the next camp. And, like, that's not what I thought a Hogwarts, like, Harry Potter game was going to be. But it is something that has just really lasted, that type of game when it comes to how open worlds are structured. And when I look at the way some of those older games were put together and the way that, pre that early PS3 era, we had other open world games, even like the first two Assassin's Creed games or something like Infamous, where it's easy
mm,
to argue that we hadn't really figured out how to make an open world itself have stuff to do.
yeah, everyone
Because,
was kind of approaching it a little bit differently. Things like Prototype, things like Infamous, like they're not quite the
yeah,
same.
yeah, there was no standardization. And that's a good thing in its own way, too. But I think it does speak to the fact that when these games started coming out, everybody started doing it. You had said yourself before, even something that is very well designed can't always stand up to that much repetition.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's plenty of space for something like a Ubisoft formula that people talk about. I don't really think people ever talk about it positively these days, but the kind of formula that exists there, I don't think is inherently the problem.
Yeah.
Obviously, I like things like Breath of the Wild where things are a little more emergent, but just the idea of having something a little more like Brotherhood, um, I don't think that on its own is the issue, but it's just when so many franchises are going in that direction. And there was so much frustration around Ubisoft and people feeling like franchises that didn't need to be that were kind of becoming that.
Yeah.
And everything was kind of getting generalized and
I think Ghost
um,
Recon was one of those that, you know, players who consider themselves like big Ghost Recon fans. I don't know how well received Ghost Recon was when it turned out that that series was now becoming another, marker clearing open world, right? And,
mhm.
to be fair, like Breakpoint is, by all accounts, like a really good game and very fun in its own ways. But yeah, I really wonder how Ghost Recon fans felt when they got that news. And it's just really interesting to think about because one of your recent videos, I think your most recent video, about does modern Ubisoft have what it takes to like make an AC1 remake, right? And for me, the answer to that has always been no, because in simple words, like I just don't think they would get it, quote unquote, right?
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah.
think they have the I don't think they have the disposition to get it. I don't think they have like the kinds of ways of thinking that are like encouraged compared to like everything else that they're doing to like make that game shine for what its merits would be, basically. This, I guess, homogenization and like making more generic franchises, like I think it has definitely hurt in some ways, especially because some games are weakened when they have to be bigger than they can be. Like
Mhm.
there are
Yeah.
some series and some games and some experiences that just stop working as functionally when they're expanded to such a just ridiculous scale. I think there's
That's why I was so pleased with Lost Crown, Prince
yeah.
of Persia coming out and being allowed to be small. Um, it doesn't seem like Ubisoft was pleased with it, but I was very glad again that it got to exist and it got to be that, and that there were people within Ubisoft who wanted to make that.
Yeah, like it's one of my favorite games. I really enjoy Metroidvanias like a fair bit. I think they have a lot of overlap with Souls-like world structure, just in the way that you explore a world, open shortcuts for yourself, right? Like that's an aspect that I really enjoy, and Lost Crown in particular adheres to a very similar kind of checkpoint system where when you die, you will always respawn at like hard checkpoints that you have to rest at, basically. And so that to me was a really fascinating experience, and I wouldn't have originally thought that a Prince of Persia game would be a great place to express that kind of design, but it worked really, really well. It was great.
Definitely was one of the most pleasing surprises of last year.
I was really surprised at just how good it felt to control as well. Something about modern Ubisoft, this may just, again, be more bias on my end, but I just don't expect the most smooth and polished control schemes from most of these games. And yet,
Mhm.
that one really surprised me in a very positive way.
Honestly, I do think that the reputation Ubisoft has now is partially why I felt like maybe there was space to talk about it and not feel too self-conscious about talking about things that have already been talked about to death,
Mm-hmm.
because so much discussion on Ubisoft games right now is the frustration people have with them, and for some people how much of a joke they can be,
Yeah,
right?
and that's really quite
And
sad when you think about it because we know, like you and I, like what they can be if they chose to be.
mhm. In a space where it feels like so much of that conversation isn't just about the game, right? That's kind of why I felt like I had a little bit of room to talk about things that aren't that loudly being talked about, I guess. Obviously, all of these topics are things that are being discussed a lot within these communities, but there just isn't the same kind of ability to discuss things uh, in something that has more of that saturation. Like, I love From games, but what could I meaningfully add to that discussion? I
Right.
don't know that I have stuff that I really could talk about that I haven't heard talked about better by other people. But
Yeah.
when it comes to Assassin's Creed, I don't think there's as much respect for it as a franchise.
Yeah.
And so people don't bother digging into it in that way as much.
Yeah, that's felt like it's been the case for years, and it's what partially motivated me to start doing YouTube for Assassin's Creed. You know, I was like, what can we do if I take this franchise seriously? Basically, like if I engage it with the same gravitas as like something that is more respected tends to be.
Hmm.
And I think that's
Yeah.
really, really interesting. And in a way, I think that's kind of necessary because when we don't engage with games in that way, we sort of like let them off the hook a little. How much of Assassin's Creed feels like it can just coast on a certain level of mediocrity just because nobody cares anyway. Games like Souls, they do get talked about a fair bit more. They do get more analysis. That means that people are generally more aware. Whereas Assassin's Creed for quite a while has been kind of like a blind spot for a lot of players. Quote unquote, there's simply no need to talk about it. Like everybody knows what this is, right? Maybe not. Maybe there's more to say. I really resonate with what you said about what could I meaningfully add to conversations about From games. I ache in my bones to like make videos on Souls games. And I just don't. I don't know if there's anything I could do that would actually be like worth paying attention to. Like you said, like it's mostly been done by others already. Probably better. I would love to. I think it would be really fun. It's something that I always kind of like hesitate and stop myself from doing for that reason.
It is interesting there. And I did make a couple Armored Core videos just because, thought it would be fun to. One
Mm-hmm.
was just an April Fool's prank, which was my all AC
AC,
games ranked, yeah,
yes.
back in the day. But that was still a very fun video to make. I was glad I got to make that. But it is something that I think about when it comes to what can I talk about here. Because when I made my first video, it was that settings ranking. I know people must have been doing that somewhere, but I couldn't find it. Like, I couldn't find a settings ranking video before I made mine. And then I saw some after that. But I was shocked that in a franchise where the setting is like the big thing people connect with, in 2020, I couldn't find that kind of video.
Yeah, you would have assumed there would be at least like one or two. On the note of Armored Core, did you enjoy 6? I assume you've played like most, if not all, of the series.
I did personally enjoy 6, yeah.
So did I. I know that, you know, for a variety of reasons, it's a little bit controversial among AC players. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really creative and interesting, the approach that it took.
I would struggle to make a video where I ranked it with the others,
Yeah.
similar to the video I made before, but it was by far one of the most enjoyable experiences I had. And I didn't really engage with it in terms of how it compares to the others in the playthroughs that I did.
Yeah.
I think I had to play through it 3 times to get all the endings. I would like to at some point engage with it based on what it takes from the older games, what it doesn't, what applies more to maybe modern sentiments from FromSoft compared with what they were doing back in the day with Armored Core. But I
Yeah.
definitely had a ton of fun playing Armored Core 6, and I have it happily on my shelf next to Armored Core 5 and all my other From games.
Awesome. Yeah, it was very different. You know, a part of me does miss the heavier feel and the more consequential feel of like modding my Armored Core and like buying different parts and like that really feeling like it makes a huge difference, right? Like learning to pilot an AC in the older games is something that, you know, you could kind of get better at for a very long time. Learning to pilot an AC in 6 was something that is comparatively more comfortable, I guess would be the word for it. And, you know, how much a player appreciates that and whether they feel that's a loss is, you know, gonna vary from player to player. But I can totally understand why it wasn't a clean, like, yay, this is obviously better, right? Like that's
And Armored Core as a franchise has been so weird for so long, even
yeah,
accounting for that gap.
yeah,
Because you look at 4 and 4 Answer and how wild some of the gameplay is when you're doing that, fighting White Glint in 4 Answer and just how fast and frenetic it is, compared
yeah,
with 5, where it is very clunky, but the gameplay is just like you're wall bouncing half the game.
yeah. It's like
Um,
lightning fast. Yeah,
Yeah, it's just such a different thing. So 4, 5, and 6 are also different from one another
yeah.
when you look at 1 through 3. And when I say 1 through 3, I mean all the games within those generations.
Yes, yes, including like because it's funny how players nowadays are like, oh, From Software are doing like spin-offs with Night Rain, and it's like, no, no, you don't understand. Like, From Software were the kings of spin-offs once upon a time. Like,
Yeah. I mean, they didn't always wait a year to put out games back then. Like,
yeah,
they would just make new levels, make it a new game, and put it back out there. And it was, again, we talk about being around for different eras
mm-hmm.
in video games. Back when Prince of Persia: Sands of Time could come out, and Warrior Within was very different, and Two Thrones was very different, but they were very clearly made off of the same basic assets,
Yeah, yeah.
and then kind of retooled and reskinned there in some ways. Whereas nowadays, people are a lot more critical about things that don't feel radically different.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a shame because for me, that's never really been much of a detraction or much of a loss. I would much rather have a game reuse things that still work perfectly fine as long as it's, iterating and refining and innovating in other ways.
Hmm. Yeah. And again, we go back to that question of cost, right? The need to make something totally new, something no one's seen before, totally unique every single time. I feel like is good in its own way, of course, and it opens up possibilities in some ways, but it also
It also,
prevents us from getting
yeah,
certain experiences.
yeah. It definitely, like, I just try to think of, like, how many games have died, like, during the planning phase just because they couldn't justify, you know, having to do that.
Hmm.
And yeah, just kind of sucks to think about.
Yeah, it does.
Funny enough, like on the note of AC6, that game, some of the conversation around that game online really fascinated me at the time. People were pointing out how compelling the story could be, even though you never see anyone's face or you never see, like, a human in the game ever,
Hmm.
really. Like, all you get is their voices, and if they happen to be attached to a particular mech, you can kind of see what their mech looks like and their emblem and their call sign, right? And that's about it. And even with that amount, they could tell the story that they told and be so like effective and evocative. It's one of the games that I always point to be like, hey, you don't need like to make the most expensive thing of all time. Like this game doesn't even have character models.
Yeah, it's really cool seeing stuff like that. And I'm sorry if I go on too many tangents, but I think about something like Persona 3. Like I
Yeah.
played some of the Persona games more recently in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at Persona 3 Reload, which I enjoy, versus something like Persona 3 Portable, which I had played after Fez. And because it's on the PSP, so much of it is just presented in a visual novel style. You don't have character models for some people, and
Yeah.
you don't get to explore these areas in 3D like you would in some others. And obviously, that detracts from the experience, but I was amazed when I played that for the first time how much I felt like it was the same as those other experiences, just because of how well the backgrounds were, drawn, how well the story came across, even if it was just with pictures.
Yeah.
Um, and so the different ways that you can do those things, which is another difference in gaming now, where we don't have such a big differential in the technology that exists.
Right.
We don't have handhelds and consoles anymore. Now, the handheld is the Switch, which is also your console. And yeah, it's not as powerful as some of the other things out there, but we we don't live in the 2D or 3D era anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I think what's really cool about that as well is, you mentioned playing a lot of licensed games earlier in life. Surely you must remember that, you know, the difference between a game on like GameCube versus like on Game Boy Advance, right? Or like the difference between
Yeah.
a game on like PSP versus like PS2 or PS3, right? Like sometimes they were completely different games, completely different genres. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that's really fascinating to think about. Like I had a series of unfortunate events game on Game Boy Advance that was kind of like a puzzle platformer type thing of sorts. And it was just so fascinating to me that that was so different from, whatever versions of the games might exist on home consoles, which I never even played.
Yeah. I mean, we live in this era now where you're coming out with new games, but most games up until recently and probably still for a while will continue to be able to be ported to last generation's consoles and this generation's consoles. Whereas we talk about the shift from, say, PS2 to PS3 and Xbox to 360, where everybody was having to deal with that shift in a different way. And I think about Ubisoft, where with Splinter Cell, they just made two completely different versions
Yeah,
of Splinter Cell Double Agent. And that's only two if you account for just the console versions. But like, you wouldn't see that today. You wouldn't see someone say, yeah, we're just making two of the same game and putting them out at the same time.
yeah. They would always try to have like some kind of parody. And I think part of that is probably just because of, increased costs of development. It's much harder nowadays to justify making two different games when you can, build out and design and make all the assets for and pay all the employees for like one that you try to port to as many different platforms as is reasonable, right?
Yeah, like the Rogue Unity situation. I can't really imagine that happening again.
Right. Yeah. That was really really interesting to me at the time how there was some recognition there that you know not every player has this like at the time next generation console, right? But we still want to like give them an Assassin's Creed game to play. And then the way those two games are narratively linked to each other, right? You know,
Hmm.
ups and downs, like pros and cons when it comes to doing that. I wouldn't say I hold either game in particularly high esteem, but
Sure. Yeah.
they were cool. Like they were interesting that idea was present.
Yeah. And from such different places, one being built from the ground up for better and for worse, and the other being Black Flag again for better and for worse. And so
Yep.
having both of those sensibilities occur at the same time was something that I guess was kind of common back then, right? People had to adapt to the fact that the technology that people had access to was different, and it was just so bizarre back then too, just thinking about the PS3 and the kind of machine it was and what you had to do to get a game on there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm hoping that we can get Metal Gear Solid 4 out on modern consoles, but I don't know what they have to do to make that happen.
I would love that. I mean, I know that it's basically playable on PC emulation at this point, to the point where a lot
Mhm.
of players are even playing like its version of Metal Gear Online, and it's like it's quite active.
Yeah,
So that's just fascinating to me. But
yeah, no, it's really cool.
yeah, like on the note of game preservation and game conservation, I do wish some games were more available, I guess would be the word, or just accessible. Like you can't really play AC1 on like a modern PlayStation ecosystem. You can do so on
Mhm.
Xbox because,
Yeah,
it has like backwards compatibility, but there are a bunch of games that are just kind of like fallen through the cracks and they're back there and no one has really done much to bring them onto modern consoles. Emulation exists, but again, not everyone is on PC. It makes experiencing these games and discussing them really tough to do.
it definitely does. Yeah, I think that kind of snuck up on me, realizing how difficult it is to engage with Assassin's Creed 1. Because, like I said, I play most of my games on PlayStation, so the only Assassin's Creed game I have on PC is AC1. And so, because I'm lucky enough to be able to have both, I'm still able to play AC1, but otherwise, it really would be a struggle.
And I think that kind of informs part of the conversation around should AC1 get a remake or should it just get like a port or a re-release? Because
Hmm.
if it did just get a remake and it doesn't have a port or re-release, then it would be, an even more egregious version of what happened with AC3, where it was straight up just delisted from stores. Like, you can no longer buy original Assassin's Creed 3 anymore.
Yeah, and I definitely think that when you talk about that conversation, it's kind of a shame that making these new products, if I'm going to talk about it very clinically, becomes such a financial discussion, right? It becomes a discussion based around the ability to even play the older games, the way that they're doing it just to be able to, charge more for a remake if they were to make a remake.
Yeah,
Just the fact that a remake in of itself, regardless of what people think about remakes as a whole, because there's a lot of different opinions out there,
yeah,
it can't just be seen as a love letter to the first thing. It has to be seen as a thing that's going to have an impact on the first game, a thing that's going to have an impact on how people view it, on how people are able to access it. And in many cases, it does look like, as we saw with the original AC3, there are financial reasons that companies will limit your access to the originals.
yeah. And I think that's really a shame because there's a lot we can learn from these older games, and I don't think it serves us as, creative people to not have that access. When I think about it, like, who does it help to not be able to, like, play and experience and think about and reflect on this older title? And really, the only people it benefits are the ones who are asking you to pay money.
And that's why I really appreciate when we at least get some insight into the developers behind these games, because I remember when they were coming out with the Ezio trilogy, especially, I felt like that was something I was always seeing. I felt like I knew who was making this game. I felt like I knew who was behind it. And even though I was very frustrated with AC3, I felt that with AC3 too.
Yeah, the
Like I said, I was,
little developer diaries or like behind the scenes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I felt that with Bordeaux, with Mirage.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I felt it as much with a lot of the other newer games that came out. And so that was also a nice difference in the direction they went with advertising Mirage, I suppose. The transparency of talking about who was making it and seeing that there are people behind this. It's not just the corporation approving this, making the decisions. Being able to see faces and connect them to the thing that actually comes out.
Yeah, it makes a difference for sure. And I'm sure that part of it was informed by, calling back to that previous era because a big part of like Mirage's reason for existing is being this homage or tribute to the early days of the series, as it were. Part of that was also reflected in the marketing and the approach they took for it because that is what they did at the time. I I still have fond memories of those AC1, AC2, AC Brotherhood, Dev Diaries, and then I think around Revelations is sort of when it slowed down a little bit more. Around AC3 as well, it like slowed down a little bit more, and then after that, I feel like there was barely anything from then on.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, again, talking about Prince of Persia.
Yeah,
The copy I had a an extras tab, and I could just watch a lot of that stuff. I could watch
yeah,
the making of. They really wanted you to be able to engage with the behind the scenes process back then.
yeah. I think I remember watching that exact same little video, called like a making of documentary that they had like on the disc where you could see like the prince's wireframe. I remember like it's stuck in my memory like the prince has like 150 different animations. He doesn't have 150 different moves, right? Like, and for
Mhm.
some reason that sentence just stuck in my head ever since then. And it's just so cool to look back on because, you know, not many games would give you that like look behind the curtain. Honestly, like seeing that little behind the scenes video was probably partially responsible for, why I care about games so much and why I find them so interesting and why I care about their development and the way they're built and why I'm always, curious beyond the standpoint of a player. Like I always want to know more about how these things are constructed, like what decisions happen, right? And that little
Mhm.
video probably had a hand in that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely appreciated things like those existing back then. And I do try to, when I make any of my videos, have in mind the people behind the work itself, the people who were making it, and separating that from some of the stuff that frustrates me about the reasons for their existence or whatever else.
Yeah.
Like I've talked at length about how Brotherhood is such a good game in so many ways, but it was also backed by so many decisions that I think were very harmful by the
Yeah.
company
Yeah.
that don't really get reflected in the gameplay or the game itself. It's really just all behind the scenes, and it's kind of interesting to think about it in that way and to at the same time care about it very much and also wish they hadn't done it the way they did.
Yeah. I remember reading articles at the time about, Assassin's Creed episodes, right? Like or something of that nature. I think is what it was going to be called at first. And then
Hmm.
we learned that like, hey, this is functionally like an expansion to AC2 instead of like being its own game, but then, it turned out to be its own game and everything around that, yeah, definitely felt a little bit weird at the time.
Hmm. Which is something you get from experiencing it at the time. When Revelations was coming out and they were saying this is going to be a Nintendo DS game called Lost Legacy, and
Yeah.
you get ready for that. And then suddenly I see a Game Informer article with a full game that's coming out and kind of comes out of nowhere. And so just your perspective on these things can change so much within just a year.
It's these kind of things that make me wonder like what must it have been like on the inside, just to be told like, hey, you're making a PS3 game now, right?
Hmm.
Like whoa.
Yeah. I do everything in my power to try to appreciate things like that and just not assume what it was like, because I don't want to give people the impression that I know much about game development other than being an observer, being someone who plays these games, which is the same perspective I have toward any aspect of any game I talk about that maybe I don't know as much about. And that's why it's been very nice that, people like you, people like Kenography, people like Animus Drifter, they're willing to talk to me about these things. And there's so much out there that can be discussed and so much out there that can be explored.
Hmm.
Um, and the fact that I don't have to limit my own discussion about it to the very limited perspective I've had on my own is something that's been very special to me. So I also use that as an opportunity to thank you again for wanting to talk at all.
Yeah, thank you. I really have enjoyed, the things you've been doing. I've wanted to shine more of a light on that. Like for sure, like I definitely want to talk about like this community aspect because before we began, like you did kind of bring that up briefly. So do you have any like
Mhm.
further thoughts on just what the experience of that all has been like?
Again, talking about the feeling that you get from it, the appreciation that I've had from the community side of things was something that I don't think I necessarily expected. Because when you look at a comment section on YouTube, it can feel very opaque sometimes.
Yeah.
It's just so many people coming in, and it's hard to feel like you're talking to a person. I do try to talk to people. Some people have told me maybe I shouldn't like engage in the comments too much because it can lead to some problems. But I do like to thank people when they come in, and I like to try to have conversations with people when they come in. And I do think because I don't have like a huge audience or anything, it kind of stays at a level where the people who are engaging with the content are people who actually want to and not just people who saw the thumbnail and clicked on it. So there have been some very nice conversations I've been able to have. But discovering all of these different communities and all these people who are willing to talk about stuff has been something that's been really special to me. Again, that exists with people like yourself and Animus Drifter and Kenography. It exists on the other side of that spectrum too, because I do recall when I first started, I had said something critical about Revelations and like the development of Revelations. And this was a few years back. I think I must have had like 1,000 subscribers at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And someone like on Twitter had gotten upset about it. And so people were like spamming my comment section coming from that one Twitter post. It was different. Like, I don't think I could say it was like that harmful just because it felt so distant from reality, I guess.
Yeah.
And it's also like a very fair thing to want to talk about these things and engage with them and they weren't doing it in what I would call a very nice way, but they were still doing it, and it was still their right to do it. And they didn't cross lines, I would say. It was mean, but they didn't cross lines.
Right.
But somebody who was very defensive of me at that time, personally, who was like sending me messages, was that boy Aqua, who makes general review videos. So it was very kind of him to do that. I chatted with White Light once. That was,
I would
very
love
cool
to do
to
that. That
do
would
that
be
once.
so cool.
I chatted was the wrong word. I've spoken to White Light once.
Uh-huh.
But it was very fun being able to meet a lot of different people, a lot of whom have very different perspectives from me on the series.
Yeah.
As we had already discussed, like the way that you engage with it, right? There's so many things that we share when it comes to how we feel about this franchise, but there's a lot that we don't. There's a lot where just the places that we were at when we came to these games are always going to differ.
Yeah.
But especially after spending as much time as I did on something like the Assassin's Creed Reddit back in the day, which can be kind of difficult to parse through without getting upset, I suppose.
Yes, it can.
People can be.
Yeah.
Finding community where people are very interested in teaching and interested in listening and interested in caring about a specific thing
Yeah.
is probably one of the most special things that I've personally gotten from making these videos at all.
I would say that's my favorite aspect as well, and it's something that, I always like to, a little bit tongue in cheek, like reference this idea of like a brotherhood, right? We're all assassins, we're all like sharing information, we're all teaching each other. It's a little bit of a silly thought, but it's something that makes me happy to like think about. It's something I want. It's something I like to try to like manifest and to engage with and to like bring about more of. And so whenever that can happen, I'm happy and it feels really good for me. So it's kind of awesome that you've noticed this yourself and it's something that you appreciate as well. I'm really glad.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a really great part of it. I like looking at the videos people will put out and seeing in the comments section, hey, I recognize that person. I've talked to that person. Because there are very clear voices within the community and people who are sharing a lot of information on whether it be how different things work or again just personal feelings like you do in some of your other videos where it's more review based. Just being able to have access like that is something that, as I had mentioned before, I didn't really think I would find in making these videos.
I also wasn't expecting that, to be honest. Like when I first started, like however many years ago that was, I just didn't expect how many people would like be interested in talking about these things and have this kind of curiosity and this kind of consistent repeated interest and to some extent even like kindness.
Yeah,
I think that's been really
definitely
cool.
a lot of kindness.
There have certainly been other communities, that you could go to where the general interaction is a little bit more harsh, I would say, a little bit more severe, a little bit more volatile, right? And with Assassin's Creed, like, sure, there are places you can go where you'll get that. Like Reddit in particular, I think has, in the years since Origins and particularly Odyssey, has gotten like a lot more unstable slash volatile to the point where, I stepped away from that ecosystem for quite some time. I occasionally visit it again. I don't know if it's gotten like much better or if it's calmed down all that much, but I definitely noticed a shift between how interesting and fun and just calm it was to discuss various things. There was kind of like a before and after for me, and at a certain point, like, I had this experience of, no matter how kind I was and how like patient I was and how understanding I was and how I presented my points, like whether I did so like emotionally or intellectually or whatever, there was always a level of pushback where it's like, you don't like the thing that I like, but that's there, and I don't know, like maybe it's different now. That's definitely been something I have experienced. And so to be on YouTube and to like have these, recurring names and profile pictures that keep popping up in all these different comment sections, I think is really cool. Yeah, like we all kind of like each other's stuff and we do our best to like support each other in whatever small way we can. Yeah, that's something I really value as well.
I mean, I still find, like, despite the high level of anonymity I am afforded and the fact that it has been such a nice experience. I do get nervous whenever I put a video out, even if it's something that's not controversial, something that seems pretty simple. Like, I do struggle sometimes with telling myself, yeah, you're just going to talk for an hour and you are going to put that on the internet and have people perceive your voice in that way for the whole
Yeah.
time. Sometimes I've like just not put something out for a week just because I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for that right now, like if I'm up for that. And so when you put something out and people can disagree but still talk to you, right? And it becomes a discussion because that's all I can really do
Mm-hmm.
is give my end of the discussion and allow for anyone who private messages me or makes a comment to add another end to that discussion that we can then have, right? The fact that people have consistently been willing to chat about stuff, and by and large, people have been interested in engagement, which again, I think I would somewhat at least apply to the smaller size of the people who would view my videos. But even at that, like people coming in and being willing to talk is always something that is a sort of sense of relief when I do put something out, because as much as I of course wouldn't like to complain, because it's such a nice thing to be able to have this as a hobby and to be able to make these videos and have anybody watch them at all, sometimes it is a little nerve-wracking to get myself ready to do it.
I mean, I can super relate to that, believe it or not. Like, I get nervous before every time I upload anything.
Mm-hmm.
Even like you said, when it is something that I look at and I'm like, I don't see too many people disagreeing with this, right? Even when it's something
Yeah.
like that, it's still like, I hope people get it. I hope that I was able to communicate what I wanted to, because it's something that, believe it or not, like I wouldn't consider myself especially good at. It's something that I always feel like I need more practice at. It's always a little bit of a scary thing to upload anything.
When
So
you say like more practice, you mean like the making of videos?
the making of videos, but also the way I formulate my points, the way I write,
Mm.
the way I structure and organize the things I'm saying. Like, I think all of that. Whenever I look at anything I've uploaded, I'm always like, I wish I could have done this better, right? Or,
Mm.
it's never quite at like the level I want it to be. And part of that is just because I do, like yourself, I watch quite a lot of things, and I really enjoy like a lot of the things that other creators do and make, and I'm always like, how can I make something that others will enjoy as much as I enjoy this, right? And
Yeah.
that can be a hard comparison to make because it's obviously very difficult to quantify, right? But even so, like
Yeah.
I'm always just like I wish I could do it better every time, and I wish I could do it better than I do, right? Which I think is a
Yeah.
an understandable feeling.
I think it's a very understandable feeling, and I think it's a very common feeling that people in almost any field would have. And it's certainly something that I feel when I make videos of, once I put something out, I try not to think about the quality too much. But when I have it as a completed thing in, Adobe,
Mm-hmm.
I regularly have this thought of like, this is just not, I don't think this is good. I don't think this is worth putting out. And so
I get
I
that
just
all the
have to have
time.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, that feeling of I have to put this out, or not I have to, but like at a point you have to be done has to has to supersede that feeling of this needs more. And eventually I always get to that point. But even beyond that, as we had been talking about before, back in the day, I would just lurk and I would just watch things, and it would be content like yours. And it would be content like yours that I would stumble upon partially because of the fact that it was high quality content, both in terms of the fact that it was being informational in a way that you wouldn't see on YouTube, and the fact that it was very easy to follow.
That's
So,
something that is a big concern of mine, and something that I'm always very caught up in, and really trying to like make true.
so I'm not trying to obviously tell you to stop feeling that way because it's a natural way to feel, but just giving my perspective that I think is a lot of other people's perspective. We talk about voices in the community, names that come up. I think for a lot of people, you are one of those names. And so being able to access your content, having that content, I don't know if I'd be doing videos like this if the community didn't exist in the way it did when I started. And I think you're a big part of the community that existed as it did when I started. So again, Not saying that you were fishing for compliments or anything,
Uh,
but just letting you know that I do appreciate everything that you have done there.
that's really cool. I'm very grateful. Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely something I'm gonna be thinking about, and hopefully contributes to me doubting myself a little bit less. That would be nice for everybody, I think.
Yeah, it would. It would.
Yeah, on the topic of, making videos and stuff, like one of the questions I did have here is, what would you highlight as an aspect of this that is challenging?
I would say that scripting it all out is always the part that takes me the longest, which
Yeah.
is interesting on account of the fact that I did journalism work to get myself through school. Writing things at a level has always been something I had comfort in, but when I write the videos that I make, some of these scripts end up being quite long, like several dozen pages long. I don't try to make especially long videos. I try to keep them as short as I can, which I struggle with sometimes. But there are times where I will have like a full draft and I will read it and I will think this is not the draft that I want it to be. And I'm always aware that I'm like talking about a video game in a way that is very general. Right? I'm not trying to add new insights or anything particularly special there, but I still, if I'm going to talk about something, I want to talk about it in a way that fully describes what I mean to say. And that's something that can take me a while. So if I'm ever going to get stuck on a part, it's going to be me feeling like the words on the page don't adequately convey what I feel and what I
Yeah.
mean.
Yeah.
And I'd say the other part of scripting things out is I do like to be as cognizant of different perspectives as possible, while also not just ping ponging between what other people think. Like, I know it
Yes.
still has to be my video,
Yeah.
and I still have to talk about what I feel. I have to be aware of, like, if I have a video that gets a lot of views, some of the people that I know who are going to be chatting with me there are people who probably dig in deeper
Hmm.
in certain things, and as a result, maybe appreciate certain aspects of it that maybe I wouldn't. And I wouldn't even say that's a result of ignorance on my end inherently. It's just people like different things about different games and different pieces of art in general. And
Right.
so they'll have a certain perspective there. And on the other end of that, while I don't want to, always stick to the mean, there's a large chunk of the audience who doesn't know what a side eject is.
Right, of course. This is something that I encounter as well.
And not only doesn't know what a side eject is, but like if you told them, they probably wouldn't care.
Right, and this is a conversation I've been having like recently with Animus Drifter. Sorry to cut in. It's just
Hmm.
something that is
No.
so relevant to this. He's given me a bunch of footage of some odd behavior with parkour in the new Mirage patch, and
Hmm.
he doesn't have a huge amount of time nowadays to present it himself on his channel. And so he's kind of like given it to me. And I'm looking at this stuff and I'm reading this stuff. And, you know, some of it, like, I'm barely understanding, even though I would say I'm someone who's like very passionate about this aspect of the games. And so I'm just reading this stuff and I'm like, how do I present this to people in a way that like they're gonna understand and or care about it? For a lot of players, like this new parkour patch is like reasonably fine. And so a lot of these situations, like they're either situational or when they do happen, I don't know if it's something that's necessarily going to bother a huge amount of players. And on top of this, in order to even describe these things, like it uses some pretty complex language. And so now I have this dilemma of how do I present this in a way that's going to be understandable without also stripping the meaning out of like what's being talked about. And that's really, really hard because I would say I have an above average number of viewers who do care about, the more technical aspects of the games. And yet, even so, like, sometimes it's just too much. Like, I don't know if I can use all of this terminology. Like, and
Yeah.
just thought that was something interesting, of your point of, some of these people don't even know what a side eject is.
Hmm. Like when I made my Brotherhood video, because I had just wanted to make 3 Ezio trilogy videos in a row just to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I had talked with both Kenography and Animus Drifter at that time, and one of the things in the Brotherhood video that Animus Drifter was talking to me about was the exact angle that 2 buildings could meet to where a side eject would have you either go up onto the roof, hang on the roof, or it would glitch out and not work at all, or not work at all, but Ezio wouldn't register that there was something to grab. That was like a 30-something minute video, I think. That wasn't one of my longer ones. And so integrating something like that, like the angle of two roofs meeting into a video where I'm also just talking about, hey, this is an aspect of the story that I found emotionally resonant, right? Something
Yeah.
that is that broad and just based purely on how I emotionally feel about something, nothing more. Integrating other stuff like that is something that I always try to think about how I can do,
And
right?
if
And in
it's
the
even
case of
worth doing,
uh-huh.
yeah, like
Yeah, is it worth doing sometimes, right? But sometimes I feel like if I were to say it's not worth doing, then that, like, it feels
it's
almost
tough.
irresponsible to do it sometimes because, these are the things that there is such a community around it who does care about it,
Yeah.
right?
It's
And so I
hard.
tried to, in the Brotherhood video, to as broadly as I could think about what does this mean to me, right? It means that obviously AC2 and AC Brotherhood don't function exactly the same. There are changes that were made. Some of them do feel a little sloppier than others, and that's something that continues in Revelations where there are ups and downs on the system there. And so being able to tie in minute changes to a system that mean a lot to some people and might mean less to others, but try and explain it in a way that showcases that, yeah, there are things happening behind the scenes here. The way the game works is a little different,
Yeah.
and we are looking at a different experience from the previous game and making that something that, to the best of my ability, I can share with other people. And it's always tough being in between, right?
It
Because
is. It is.
if you're trying to make something in between, then I don't dig into things as deeply as you or Animus Drifter would. It's just not the niche that I have within what I do there. But I also do have chunks of time where I'm talking about this stuff, and sometimes I get comments saying, why this was a meaningless 5 minutes of this video to me,
Right.
right?
That's exactly the thing that makes it so tough because, hopefully, like, I'm able to avoid this kind of thing. And I see exactly what you're saying when you're like, to just outright disregard it as not worth it, like, does feel a little irresponsible. But on the other hand, like, I don't know if I can always justify, like, presenting that level of complexity. Then I'm kind of flirting with this idea of what if those people straight up just leave and they miss the other really important stuff that would have been beneficial for them to hear about just because I happened to get so deep into granularity that I didn't know how to present adequately, or maybe I shouldn't have even attempted to.
And there are times I've changed my scripts based on that. I mean, back when I did Unity, I had a large chunk of the video. I realized I was using way too many acronyms, and I'm like, you stand on this NSO, you track over to this thing here, and I'm like, I'm just gonna call it a post. You stand on this post,
Yep.
and you jump from that post, right? Because that makes more sense. And so just trying to engage with it in that way without ever getting too close to the mean, where I'm only talking about things that people who don't even play the games would understand, because that's not the point of why I make the videos in general. Is I do want to talk about all these things.
Yeah.
I just try to do it in a way where I am respectful of the time of the people who are watching, I suppose. And I think especially with an audience like yours, you're going to have a lot more people who really do want to engage with this stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I do think there are plenty in mind too, but I think like shorts go out to a lot of people who might not be as familiar with a person's content, because shorts are just put out there in different ways by YouTube.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I remember one of the only times I really made a technical video was when Mirage was new, and so people were talking about it on YouTube less, and so I just talked about what I noticed my first day of like how Descent was different, specifically from like Valhalla and Odyssey. And I got a lot of comments that were just like, if you hold O, you go down. And it was like,
Yes.
that's not really what I was talking about here.
Yep.
But yes, I do understand. Most people are fine just holding O and going down, and just like hanging off of each thing on the way down or just dropping down. But there were a lot of people who, because there was such a different audience on that short that went out to different people, they couldn't even comprehend why I was talking about different ways you
Yeah.
can make your
Yeah.
character go downwards.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's kind of like the risk I'm always taking, because I'm somewhere like in the middle where I'm definitely not as technical as a channel like Animus Drifter, but I'm also, less general than some other channels. And yeah, as you
Yeah.
said, like being in the middle is really tough, because how do I, present this in a way where it's gonna make sense, but it's also not gonna like push people away, right? It's a tough call to make sometimes. But the things you brought up about just using more general language and using language that is a little bit more descriptive of what's actually being shown is certainly helpful.
Tough to do a lot of the time.
It is because
when-
you're fundamentally doing like an active translation.
Yeah, yeah. And it is definitely difficult to do that. I think it does become easier when people get more familiar with how these things work. I follow Devil May Cry stuff a lot. You don't need to really explain a lot of the jargon in Devil May Cry to a lot of people these days, even though there's such a general audience.
You like action games too? Let's go, dude.
I try to. That's one game. Like I've played the heck out of all the Devil May Cry games, except DMC, just because I haven't been able to get to it, like the reboot. But that's one game where I don't think I'd ever really show footage of myself playing it, because I've done pretty much everything I could do. I've S ranked everything without getting hit. And even then, I look at myself playing the game, and I'm like, yeah, that just does not look like what the people who really dig into this game
like
look
it's not Donguri.
Yeah, like I've reached where I'm content being.
Yeah.
I feel like I've done pretty good, but Devil May Cry is a great example of a franchise where it's like people have dug into this hard, but because of that, it's easier to talk about it because people understand all the jargon.
Yeah.
Whether it be the different jump canceling things that you talk about in a game like that fans kind of came up with, or if it's things that are already in the game, like people know what a stinger is, people know what any of these different moves are without having to explain every single one.
Yeah.
Which is definitely very helpful, and it's a little harder when you are on a topic where a lot of people don't necessarily have that vocabulary. Even if you were to explain to them what you're talking about, they would know what you're going over because they have to engage with those things to play the game.
Yeah, they've seen them visually, even if they don't have like a term to like assign or associate to them. I quite enjoy action games in general, like Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, Metal Gear Rising. Recently, like Ninja Gaiden, and Ninja Gaiden 4 just came out like not too long ago. I've been playing a fair bit of that.
I've been trying to get myself ready to play Ninja Gaiden. It's something where I know mentally I just want to be ready for it when I get into it, just because everybody talks about how different of an experience it is, even if you are very acquainted with other games in the genre.
I think what's kind of fascinating to me is if you enjoy From games and you also enjoy Devil May Cry, and you play something like Ninja Gaiden 1 or Ninja Gaiden Black, you're probably in a good spot, because the way the exploration and like the level progression and the way the world is structured works, you're gonna pick that up no problem. And you're playing a game where enemies will really try to like put you down and kill you. Being someone who already has an affinity for good positioning and melee combat, like it's gonna help a fair bit, I think.
I hope so. I don't mean to be morbid in any way, but as I mentioned, being a little older than some of the others, I have had that thought of, if it's a game like Ninja Gaiden, how many years do I realistically have to be able to play it at the level I could now?
I think about that somewhat often as well, yeah. Like there are sometimes I play games that are very like fast, and I know that like reaction time is not the be all end all of being a good player, because a lot of these things like you just have to see with your eyes enough times and like parse, and eventually you don't need reaction time, right? Like that's kind of how it works. But I can't say I haven't had that same thought where it's like, one day am I always going to be able to play games that like move this quickly? A lot of the execution of stuff like DMC as well, like that's not something that you're going to be like super encouraged to play like past a certain age, shall we say.
I mean, one of the games I played this year that I really enjoyed was Nine Souls.
Oh yeah, I quite like Nine Souls.
And doing the final boss of Nine Souls, I did have that thought of like, I don't know if I could physically do this in 10 years. There were points where it just felt like I was inputting so many different things so quickly. I did have that question in my head. So again, not to dig too deep into that stuff, but if I'm going to play Ninja Gaiden, I feel like it's good to get into it soon.
The way I like to think about it is each game we play and experience kind of like adds to our pool of gaming literacy, as it were. I do think that being someone who has played both From games and DMC, you do have quite a lot of the background
I
Because,
definitely remember you talking about like fighting games in some of the content you've made, and it has always felt like
yeah, yeah.
there is a direct through line in being able to have vocabulary and dig in deep and talk about things in a genre like that, and being able to apply that to other things.
Fighting games is a field that I used to be a lot more into several years ago. I had a group of friends in high school where we would all play like the same game and we would all just try to like push each other to be the best we could be. It was one of the only times in my life where I had like a group where I would consistently do that with. And I remember it feeling like a switch clicking on in my head because up until that point, the way all of us kind of engaged with fighting games was in a very, I guess, in the way that the average player would, where you get hit by something that's frustrating or irritating, and then you're like, oh, that's cheap or whatever, and then you play by all these like fictitious rules, like all this like made up honor in your head, right? After we started playing that game, instead of doing that, we just kind of had this agreement where if something feels cheap and something feels strong, like we're just going to use that to kill each other, right? And then instead of complaining about it, we're going to help each other figure out how to beat it until
Mhm.
one of us discovers like the next cheap thing. And then we're going to figure out how to beat that until we discover the next cheap thing. And then in so doing, like the overall skill level of that entire group just like grew so quickly. And it felt like we had entered into like this whole new world, like this completely different way of like understanding games. And I think that that was very meaningful for me to have experienced at the point in my life that I did, because from then on, like whenever I engage with games, like I definitely do think of them more, I guess. It's weird to say so after I just kind of like disparaged like fighting honorably, but thinking of games a little bit more honestly, which is to say you kind of just look at it for what it is and not for like what you want it to be. With things that I have like a lot of love for and a lot of like bias for, it's kind of difficult to do. Like with Assassin's Creed, I'm never going to be able to extricate I want the series to be a very specific thing because it's what would appeal to me most. But I do think that like being able to see it for what it is helps with engaging with it and talking about it. A game like Valhalla, a game like Odyssey, they're great, but they have a lot of problems. And I think it's important to be able to perceive what those are. And then same thing like with the older games, like AC1 to 3, like they have a lot of problems. Like I love those games, but like people could come up to me and make the argument that like those are bad video games. That would hurt in my heart and it would suck to hear. But like I could totally see how someone would say that because they're simply not up to like the standard of quality of some of their contemporaries, you know?
I think one of the reasons I have had so many hopes for Assassin's Creed and that I wish it were doing more with its systems is because I was around when a lot of other systems were very primitive and have been allowed to be explored,
Yeah.
and become very complex things. And like looking back to Ocarina of Time back then, that Z targeting combat
It was
system.
revolutionary. Yeah, so cool.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of games still play just like that, right? Other than the fact that you can control a camera, like so much of third-person action feels a lot like Ocarina of Time.
It's why
But you
people
wouldn't play. Uh-huh.
like it's why people make this reference or joke that like Dark Souls is just like, edgy Zelda basically. You're still like
Yeah,
locking onto people and pivoting around them, right? Like
yeah. And yet there's been so much evolution there, and you can't really, you know, you can't just put Sekiro next to Ocarina of Time and say this feels exactly the same,
yeah, yeah.
because people demanded innovation, and so much has been done every year, and different companies try to one up each other when it comes to making third person action games,
Yeah.
whether they be in the vein of something like that or something in the character action genre. And it feels like there are a lot of concepts in Assassin's Creed that are at that Ocarina of Time level.
And just
And
haven't
that's
been
maybe what I
allowed to
mean. But
progress, yeah.
yeah, maybe a little more than Ocarina of Time, to be fair to it. But like, we just stopped there. It just didn't.
Yeah, and
It didn't move
it
forward from
feels
there.
like such a shame, and it's why when um, I don't really know how this video was received and perceived, but your video of like we deserve better than Assassin's Creed Unity, right? Like when I read that title and I watched that video, like to me, it was very apparent that it all comes from love, right? It's like this idea of like Assassin's Creed can be more than this, and it kind of hurts that like it hasn't been, and that it can't be for whatever reason, right? Like
Hmm.
why why shouldn't we demand something like something richer and fuller and more evolved? We appreciate the idea of that game and the concept of it and the philosophy of it. You know, I don't think too many people would disagree that it's just not what it could have been. And even if it had achieved everything it set out to, I don't think we should stop at just that. And that's a video that really spoke to me and really resonated with me, because that's kind of how I see the whole series. And again, for me, like it doesn't come from, you know, wanting to put Assassin's Creed down. It comes from love. It comes from recognizing like what it has the capacity to be if only it was allowed to evolve in that way. If only we could move past that like slightly better than Ocarina of Time vibe.
Yeah, yeah. I do wish there was more done with a lot of those systems. And with that video, I was pleasantly surprised. Like I'd said before, people who tend to engage with the content I make have been shockingly kind about a lot of these things. I do think that it comes from a place of the people who have found my content or people who want to talk about it. They're not just coming in to, assert a certain opinion or because they're angry about something. So I
Yeah.
very much appreciated that people, even if they disagreed, were mostly willing to chat and talk about a lot of that stuff when it came to Unity. And as I get older, I do feel less inclined to stop at that was a good idea, which I think has a lot of value. It's very valuable to identify when a concept works and a concept is good. But I've mentioned so many games that I play, right? But when I was young, I played AC3. I talk about it now, and I talk about how it's probably the game that disappointed me most of any game ever.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, I was very defensive of it because that's the only game I was going to play that year,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? So, like, and I was such a fan. I wasn't really thinking about it like a critic. I was just thinking, hey, new AC, I'm happy, it's here. As I get older, I can play other things. Like, I have the ability to do that. And so when something comes in and it's such a good concept, but it just doesn't deliver on it,
Yeah.
there's less reason for me to dig in and say, well, I'm still going to explore this in every way that I can. I really appreciate like what Bordeaux did with Mirage,
Yeah.
right? Like such a cool thing. And I think every person who worked on Mirage should be proud of what they did there. And I don't think it's their fault that they weren't funded as well as a lot of these other projects for a variety of reasons, and that they had to work off a skeleton that really isn't built for what they were trying to do. It's
Yes.
kind of amazing that they've done as much as they did
Yeah.
with bones that aren't built to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's very apparent that, you know, it is being held back in some very significant ways.
yeah. I mean, it's fascinating just to hear the vocabulary that they use, where they discuss these things that
Yeah. Yeah.
Ubisoft hasn't seemed to care about for a very long time. Um, and so I am left when I play Mirage thinking more about what could come after, if anything were to come after, more than the game itself, I suppose.
I would say that's definitely the case for me as well. Like I certainly enjoy the game. I think it's not to like relitigate, but yeah, it's a great idea. It's a great concept. I'm glad that it exists in some form. I would be lying if I said that I'm satisfied with this. And I think that even if they don't speak that aloud in the same language, a lot of players probably do feel the same. And that's why you tend to see all these comments that say things such as Bordeaux needs to like make more AC, like they need more budget, right? Like things of that nature. I think because people do identify that there was good stuff there, but it wasn't quite what we're looking for whatever reasons that may be.
And one thing that I struggle with sometimes when discussing these things is people will sometimes ask, well, what do you want it to look like then? I think the problem for me is, especially as someone who acts as an observer so often, I know something is good when I see it, right,
Yes,
with my
yes.
eyes and I've experienced it. And one of the problems with feeling like Assassin's Creed hasn't had an interest in evolving a lot of these concepts is I have things that I assume would be good based on what I've heard and what I've played, but I've never actually seen those things,
Yeah,
right?
so it's
I
hard to
see people
tell.
talk about it. Yeah. a game could come out that has everything I want it to have, and it could end up being awful for a variety of reasons I don't understand, because I'm not a game developer and I'm not an entire team of people trying to make these things. At that level, it becomes a question of like, part of why I made the video on like a remake isn't just to talk about what would a remake look like, but it's just an easy way to talk about what would a game like Assassin's Creed 1 look like.
Yeah, my answer to that is actually very interesting and weird and potentially controversial. The closest game in today's day and age that we have to something like Assassin's Creed 1 is actually Death Stranding. They're completely different games, but it's the only one I can point to where it actually like has the same essence and vibe of like it is simulating the day-to-day of a very particular archetype, and it's not altogether concerned with like how fun a player, you know, finds that in a generic sense. Like it just is what it is. And yet like if you do play into it and you do engage with it like intently, it can be a great deal of fun for all its ups and downs.
I can definitely understand where you're coming from there. And I hear a lot of people in conversation use terms like simulation, right, to discuss these different games. And simulation can be a loaded term in some ways when you're talking about like immersive sims or other things where it's hard to find the vocabulary in video games when it's such a new medium and there are so many different things that get similar words to describe them. But I can definitely see where you're coming from when you talk about, especially Assassin's Creed 1 specifically, and how it differs from what came after that.
I really do wonder, like, if we will ever see a game like that, like, you know, willing to be so bold and different and just weird and esoteric, like from Assassin's Creed. And the truth is, like, I really want to, because those are some of the aspects of AC I love the most, and they're kind of what draws me to the series. I mean, there's a lot of like really fun, especially nowadays, there's a lot of really fun open world stealth action sword video games that I can play in third person, right? But nothing is quite like Assassin's Creed. And to your point about, you know, I know what's good when I see it, I think that's why players latch onto games like Unity or you know, games like the classic ACs, you know, things of that nature, is because they're the closest to something that they find to be ideal. And so even though Assassin's Creed has never quite produced, you know, one of those titles that like fully meets its potential, those are like quote unquote like the best we have, because otherwise how would we describe like the ideal Assassin's Creed game, especially now when so many different players from so many different walks of life have experienced the franchise through different entry points. Like for me, my ideal Assassin's Creed game would be something dark, something quite grim, very serious, right? Something tight in scale and focused, involves and strong movement, something that really values and rewards like stealth play, doesn't make my combat like completely ineffectual. That's kind of what I want, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be like the best game ever. It's just something that I think if they focused on very strongly, it would be like a good game.
Yeah, and I definitely think that one of the best parts of Assassin's Creed that they do not capitalize on is the fact that you can really do a lot of unique things with this franchise without having to, you know, commit to that being something you do every year.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of like the fact that they gave us a sailing system, and they've gone back to it a couple times, but in essence, we got the pirate game, and then that was it.
Yeah.
We're trying other eras. The fact that they can do whatever they want with every new installment without it really being too disrespectful to what came before because of the nature of the concept. Like, it has to be in a new place.
Yes.
A new tone makes total sense with each one. But the parts that stay the same are the parts that kind of feel a little dull.
Yeah.
And the parts that do change are things that I kind of wish they didn't change.
Yeah.
So it's a little weird to be in that position where, you know, if they wanted to make a game set in Mongolia with really complex horse mechanics.
Yeah, they could totally do that.
I'd say, okay, you know, it's Assassin's Creed. You could do something. Keep a lot of that other stuff that's great about Assassin's Creed too. It doesn't always feel like they've capitalized on that because it's at once felt sometimes overly safe and also just not enough of what has made it great in the past, and that's a bit frustrating to engage with.
Yeah, this is a feeling I've also had for years, you know, like on the one hand, I wish they were a little braver. I wish they were a little crazier, a little more innovative. There's so much you can do with Assassin's Creed because of its overall concept, and it doesn't feel like they leverage that enough. And on the other hand, as you said, like they also scrap and walk away from really strong things that can be refined and can be iterated on and act as like a good skeleton to build on top of, to me you kind of just end up getting like the worst of both worlds, where you're not really holding on to the really strong things that work well, but you're also not letting yourself truly go as wild as you could and explore interesting mechanics and features and systems that would make sense for the setting. Because that's something that, just like the setting itself, is really unique to Assassin's Creed, and it's something that I think players enjoy, this idea of like, how does each protagonist adapt to their environment in their own unique way that feels totally different from all the others. Those are some of the aspects that are very memorable and stay with people.
I think there's a lot of potential in the series, and I do think potential is the word that I use the most when I talk about Assassin's Creed, especially the older games, just because there are all these things that at the time I enjoyed and felt like I want to know what the next step is.
And then we just never got that.
And then we never got it, yeah.
That's how I feel as well. Potential is the word to describe Assassin's Creed that feels most accurate and also breaks my heart and makes me most excited at the same time.
Like, I see no reason, and obviously you come from a different perspective, but I see no reason that parkour in these games can't feel as complex as something like a character action game.
Yeah, I would love that.
Can be dug into, right? Something where two people could play completely different ways,
yeah,
but still have the same outcome. Where it can feel tense, like there is a skill ceiling, and obviously there are those things there. Definitely not at a level that is presented to the average player.
Yeah,
and not something that as a result people feel like matters in some circles, just because the game doesn't really present it to them in ways that combat gets presented to people.
No, I hear you. And in one of the videos I made once upon a time where I discussed this idea of, how can we make a deeper parkour system without alienating players from either group, I did call out character action games having features like auto combo. You can have something like this where it's available for you if you really want to sort of abdicate your responsibility to the system, like to the animus to handle for you. But then if you do want to like experience more of it and have more control and dig a little deeper, you should be able to kind of toggle that off and assume more direct control. And one of my arguments for that is that, to a great extent, the series already sort of works like that. It's just that we don't get given the option to disable all the like automatic stuff. Like we're endlessly trapped in like the auto combo variant of play. And wouldn't it be cool if like that didn't have to be the case, right? Like,
I mean, coming from Prince of Persia, it took me a second to appreciate how Assassin's Creed was different and what it was trying to do. And like, this is not a platformer. This is a different thing. It's engaging with similar ideas in different ways. And I remember the first time I touched it, I thought, oh, the guy just does it all? Like, you just hold the button and he just goes, and you can cross the whole city without ever doing that, without like letting go. And it took a while for me to appreciate, like, one, the massive complexity on the dev end to be able to have your character go in any direction and have an animation for it almost every time.
Yeah.
Compared to something like Prince of Persia, which was linear, and so they were able to build that out. Massive undertaking to build the cities of Assassin's Creed and have a character who was built for them. Secondly, also, again, the way that this isn't a platformer. The way you're supposed to be creative and moving around is not to dodge obstacles. It's not to necessarily stay alive. You've got different goals when you are traversing the city, and in an open world, that's kind of a necessity there.
Yeah, it's something that I've always kind of had trouble reconciling, I guess. Movement and parkour are, in theory, very cool, and even in practice, if you choose to engage with them, the games seldom give you like any kind of impetus to do so, and I think that has been, to a great extent, harmful for the overall experience, and certainly for the perception of what these games are and can be. In something like Devil May Cry, like at least on lower difficulties, sure, enemies aren't trying to like murder you like constantly, but you do still have some kind of incentive to play in a way the game considers playing well, like in a way the game considers effective, because you're ranked, you're graded, you have style meter, right? And then you have like end of mission results screens. Assassin's Creed like doesn't do anything like that with movement, and I don't think it really ever has. Like, it neither has a hard incentive nor a soft incentive to engage with the system and to excel with it, and I do think that has hurt it like on numerous occasions, but I would be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I was having having a conversation with someone in my comments section just recently about a similar idea there. And I was specifically talking a bit about the Arkham combat system. And we talked a bit about a variety of things. I did bring up DMC also, and how just like the existence of a grading system can incentivize people. Something that doesn't change the game in any way in a lot of games really changes how people think about it, because it means, oh wait, this move actually has a certain amount of points. This move is weighted more than this.
Yeah.
And so there are things that exist there that don't change the game at all, but the way people perceive it is transformed entirely. But I was specifically with this person who had their own perspective, a different perspective, and we weren't trying to change each other's minds, but we were just talking about it. And we talked about Arkham Combat, and I brought up the fact that you do have that score. You get graded in a different way than DMC, but it itemizes the things that you do, and it gives you a certain score for that. It also changes the gameplay based on how well you engage with its systems, right? If you know not to button mash, the average person is always going to button mash. If you know not to, if press the button in the rhythm, then you get access to all of the other button combinations that you get.
Yeah.
For instant kills or instant attacks, because it's Batman.
Yeah.
Instant knockouts, disarm, all these other things. And then you have whatever different gadgets you can intersperse in there. And every single one of those things gives you a point total that's graded. So there's both a gameplay transformation, totally different game, if you actually learn the rhythm and you learn the mechanics, even though it's a perfectly fine experience if you don't.
Yeah.
It's a completely different experience if you do, for a combat system that I would also call fairly simple in its own way. It's not something that's meant to break your fingers when you're playing it.
Yeah.
But it has a depth to it that you can explore. And it has the fact that it tells you what you did, and it gives you a score based on it, and it gives you a certain amount of experience for that. And so the devs were very intentional with Arkham about not just building the system, but saying, these are all the things we're going to do to tell you, the player, to do them, and to sometimes force you to do them.
Yeah. I think scoring being an aspect of games, the older I get, the more I appreciate it, because it presents something else to aspire to once you have, once survival is no longer carrying the necessary amount of texture for you, basically. Yeah. And I think that's really important. That's something like Assassin's Creed lacks. And I think when you look at something like Assassin's Creed, it's so easy to say that it should have that, because survival in Assassin's Creed is seldom that taxing of an ordeal. It's probably easier to stay alive in something like AC than Arkham on average.
I wish they had done more after Brotherhood with the challenge rooms that they gave us, because they did stuff like that for a while.
That's why I like what Mirage is doing with bringing that back.
Yeah, I was really excited to see that there was stuff like that coming back. I feel like those challenge rooms in Assassin's Creed kind of understood what could be challenging, or what you could strive for, right? This isn't like you're gonna die, you want to survive. This is how long can you keep that combo going? This is how cool can you make it look? How many of these things can you string together? And it was pretty simplistic, but it was something that gave you more reason to engage with Brotherhood's mechanics than a lot of the other games have, because they open up these rooms for you to do that. They have certain parkour sections where, maybe eject to the side, even if you don't do that very often in the main game. Just giving you any reason at all to engage with this stuff. And that also does come back to the point that a lot of it is intrinsic.
Yeah.
And
because it feels cool.
Yeah, I understand the argument. What do you an A or an S on the side of your screen? That doesn't change the game. People should be engaging with the mechanics regardless. But I do think that the way people work in general is, if you give them some amount of guidance towards what would be cool or what the game values more, then people are more likely to actually engage with it.
Yeah, we can certainly catch a wider amount of players that would otherwise have no real direction to think in, or no reason to do so. For a system that Arkham is not as complex as something like DMC, I don't think anyone could really argue about that. The fact that it ties scoring and survival into the same good gameplay decisions, I think is a really big deal. You know, like if you combo effectively, your multiplier will rise quicker. You'll deal more damage. You'll crit. You'll have access to your takedowns earlier, which in the harder fights and on higher difficulties, does actually make a difference. And the whole idea of like you get more XP payouts for playing well, like that's ripped straight out of DMC, where like you get more orbs for fighting effectively and getting a better style rank, so you can like unlock more of your moves earlier, right?
Yeah. And it's something that I think people are very cognizant of. Like people have communities around the challenge rooms in Arkham because of that.
Yeah, people have communities
And
around the challenge rooms in Brotherhood, like even right
yeah,
now, and
they
that
do.
hasn't like evolved for years. Like,
Yeah, they just didn't do much else with it. And it's interesting going back to Brotherhood again, talking about how quickly that game came together. Those are pretty high quality challenge rooms. Like they look like they put some real effort into those
yeah,
things.
the fact that players can
Um,
still engage with them now, like years later, and still try to like get better clear times and better results is kind of crazy.
and that's a kind of excitement I felt with Assassin's Creed back then that I don't often feel, and I don't say that to say that like challenge is the goal or anything like that.
Yeah,
But
but
building
some
out
added
incentives.
context. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that goes both ways because I think once you start building around the context, then once people are able to engage with that and vocalize that's what they like, in the case of Devil May Cry, we saw people doing like jump canceling techniques that I doubt the developers intended, but then they did start building around those in later games, right? It
Mm-hmm.
became understood how players play, and that changes how you make the next game because you have an understanding of where things should go from
Yeah,
here and what makes sense.
this is something I love about franchises that have this kind of dialogue between player and game that feels like Assassin's Creed sort of has lacked. It's something that I wish it didn't, and I wish it did have. In something like Devil May Cry, yeah, you're very correct in pointing that out, where the games did, when they released future titles, part of those mechanical changes were responses to how the players were interacting with their game. And yeah, when you look at Assassin's Creed, that is very much not the case. It kind of just feels like each new game is sort of doing its own completely different thing, and it doesn't really feel like there's that dialogue between player and developer.
And sometimes it does feel like such a niche, and at other times it doesn't. Like I remember watching the Valhalla reveal,
Yeah.
and that was Boss Logic sketching out
Yes, that
Eivor.
long picture. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember seeing in the Twitch chat like no RPG, no RPG, no RPG. Like
Yeah, people care.
were people care. Like people know that there are certain things they don't want, and I'm not saying that like those people saying that were the Assassin's Creed audience and the true group of people who care about Assassin's Creed. But I just mean to say, like, there is enough of an audience for it to be very clear that there are people who feel that way. When you engage with any Assassin's Creed media, whether it be looking at a YouTube video or anything else, you're going to see people having these conversations.
Yeah.
But they're not all coming from the same place, obviously. Some people are deep in that niche of wanting parkour to evolve and all that.
Yeah.
Some people just don't like the RPG mechanics. They would be very happy with something that was very narrative heavy, very linear, and they'd
Hmm.
accept something more like that. But
There are players I've seen who did enjoy the RPG layer, and they've simply grown tired of it because they've had it for so many games in a row for so long that they're like, I liked this once, but now I don't want more of it. And there's
yeah,
that group of players to consider as well.
and like I said, I liked Odyssey quite a bit. That was probably my main COVID game, was AC Odyssey, and
Yeah.
I just played through the whole game, got to the end, and I realized I wanted to play it again, and I played through the whole thing again, which is a tall order for AC Odyssey.
It's a big
So
game.
for that to come out, and then for Valhalla to come out, and for me to just say, "What is this?
I
Like,
could barely get through my first
what's the
playthrough of
point?"
Valhalla. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only AC game, including Shadows, that I haven't replayed. Like I've replayed Shadows, like I said, I've never gone back to Valhalla just because of the breadth of what you have to do and the fact that they didn't add a new game plus, even though I waited for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, to have enjoyed some of the newer games and to still feel like even the best parts of those haven't been explored in a way that makes sense. The franchise is pulled in so many different directions, and that's why I don't ever try to give any answers to what the next thing should be or
Yeah.
what would be best, even if I have preferences for what I like.
I think that's why I got so excited when they announced their philosophy for publishing Assassin's Creed games, which is that we're not going to have one game try to be all things to all people. We're going to have
Yeah.
smaller, more focused games like Mirage. We're going to have big RPGs like Shadows. We're going to have unique experiences like whatever Hexe is going to be. I think that's a genuinely great idea because it's the only way in which a series this big can iterate on itself without being pulled apart in all these different directions.
Hmm.
Whatever is the sequel to Mirage can hopefully refine what Mirage did. Whatever is the sequel to Shadows can hopefully refine what Shadows did. And you know, ideally Hexa gets its own kind of lineage and descendancy in that regard.
And for me, it goes back to that statement I made of I know something is good when I do see it.
Yeah.
And I know there is this potential for so many different types of game to exist under what they've built with Assassin's Creed. And so, using terminology you had before, like waiting to see if Ubisoft has that bravery and that creativity to do new things as opposed to making big Assassin's Creed, smaller Assassin's Creed with a side eject, you know?
Yeah.
Hoping that Hexa is something totally different and that whatever comes after that could be totally different, and understanding that there is space to do so many different things on account of what kind of franchise Assassin's Creed is.
Yeah. Because it feels like they're not really leveraging one of their greatest strengths, and that's kind of what's so sad about it.
It is. A vast majority of people would probably agree that there are parts of Assassin's Creed that they wish were focused on more.
Yeah.
And regardless of which game is your favorite, I feel like with Assassin's Creed as it is right now, most people have something like that, something they feel like the games have lost track of or that they really wish they could connect to. And I'm hoping that there is that kind of change and that there is the ability to dive into these games again and feel unique experiences, and especially to feel like they're not kind of assembly lined from the last couple that
Yeah.
came before, which is something I've felt a little recently.
Same. Like it's really whenever anyone asks me what I mean by this, I find it so difficult to articulate, but I do feel like Assassin's Creed Once Upon a Time had a kind of magic to it that I just don't necessarily feel anymore. And I think no matter whether, you're an Odyssey fan or like a, more old school fan or a fan of just new and weird and wacky ideas, like most players want to feel that kind of magic. Like you don't want to play a game that makes you feel nothing, right? You want to play a game that when you play it, like it's interesting to you and it's spicy and flavorful and you feel rewarded for caring about it. And I don't think Assassin's Creed has always nailed that feeling, and I want to say like it's probably fumbled it more times than it has nailed it.
I would definitely agree there. I would say that if I were to like tier list out the games, which I've never done, I feel like it would be a pretty even tier list. You know, I have my games that I would put at the very bottom, some at the very top, and then a fair chunk in the middle. So it's not like I dislike most of the games or anything like that.
Yeah.
But we've talked about potential this whole time and about the ways in which so many of these games feel like what you're describing, where it's like, hey, we made one, let's kind of assembly line the next one, just to use the same term I did before. But
Yeah.
oftentimes they do feel a little effortless, and that's a dangerous word to use when it comes to anything artistic, because
Yeah.
so many people work on these things.
Yeah.
These are corporate products on one hand, and there are real artists working on them. That's something that is apparent in every single one of these. The artistry in every single one of these games is there.
Yeah, it just
But
doesn't always come together in the way that players, I think, would want. And so it's definitely like
Yeah.
a perception issue. And it sucks to be in that position, but yeah, like I think they definitely need to do something to help, heal that perception, like whatever it takes. Like make a game that feels magical and special and just significant.
And I think what a lot of it comes down to, in terms of a point of shock that I have, is again something we've discussed, the fact that there isn't anything like it.
Yeah.
And I don't fully understand that. Like I don't see how no other game company has scooped up this idea of franchise in a bunch of different historical settings in any way, shape, or form the way that Assassin's Creed has.
Yeah. You would
It just
think.
feels like there is so much space.
Yeah, and I think there is so much space, and it's why, for better and worse, like players just have such a death grip on Ghost of Tsushima and that series because
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the only, you know, adjacent games you can point to that's doing something even remotely similar. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like some players would, point to Red Dead Redemption and the like, but I think that only works as like a partial comparison. Something like Ghost makes a lot more sense for this kind of experience because, you know, a lot of the player behaviors and a lot of the ways you're engaging with that is very, to use one of my favorite terms, very Creed like. I do often refer to like Creed likes being certain games, stuff like Assassin's Creed, stuff like Ghost, stuff like Shadow of Mordor, but there's just not that many of them, and none of them really feel like they're using that vibe of like a historical setting. You're a cool character with a blade. Go ham, right? Like you don't really get that.
Yeah. There's so many components of Assassin's Creed that whenever they formulated it were so unique and that people just don't seem interested in trying to do their own way. I remember when Mirror's Edge came out, I thought after that there would be more AAA attempts at like parkour experiences.
Yeah, and we've
Right.
really only had
And
like Dying Light, if that.
yeah, yeah. And I mean Mirror's Edge is not like Assassin's Creed in terms of it how it functions, but it was an attempt at taking parkour and doing something with it, which
Yeah.
people don't often. I mean, I feel like the best parkour experience I've had recently, and when I say recently, I mean in the last couple decades, is like doing the gauntlet in Titanfall 2.
Yes. Oh, Titanfall 2 was so good.
You know, like, and obviously, again, you can't really look at Titanfall and say there are all these things you could apply to Assassin's Creed or anything because it's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact that the number of people trying to do anything with a lot of these ideas, not even mechanics, just ideas broadly,
It's so
is
small.
quite small.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Definitely a lot of stuff out there, but I
yeah.
definitely appreciated being able to talk about it all with you. And it's very nice that you have played a lot of the games that I've played and that we've been able to kind of have that common background, I suppose, in terms of what informs where we are now.
It's something that makes these talks really fun to do because and it's something that I think has surprised my audience from time to time because the kind of stuff I upload to the channel is a fragment of the total amount of games that I play, in part because of what you brought up earlier, where it's like some of these games have such a high degree of exploration as far as like what players have done with them that I would be self-conscious to like upload, I don't know, my DMC gameplay, right? Or
Yeah.
my my Souls gameplay, right? Just
Hmm.
because it just feels like there's such a high standard of quality for content around these kind of games. I don't know if I would feel comfortable like exposing what I can do with those systems and with those games. But I do love them and I do play a lot of them. And I play like a wide variety of different video games. And so whenever
Yeah.
I get a guest on one of these, there's almost always something I've played in common with them, and it leads to such cool conversations, and it makes me really happy.
Yeah. I'm really glad that we were able to dig into those things, especially because you had started a lot of the conversation with talking about video games as a whole and how I feel about them. And I really do appreciate video games as an art form.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
someone who I'm privileged enough that I can go to the movies fairly often, so there's a small theater near me with fairly cheap tickets. I go every other weekend if I can, see whatever small movie is out there. I
nice.
try to read a book a week if I can. But even like engaging with as much media as I can and as much art as I can, I've never felt like there wasn't space for video games too, especially as they've continued to evolve and do new things. And I
Yeah,
feel like it's such a special thing to be able to engage with that
yeah.
and to have other people that you know who engage with that and to have these conversations.
Yeah, this is something I've felt for a long time as well. Like, I love books, I love movies, I watch anime as well, right? Like I read manga, pretty much any
Hmm.
kind of media I can think of, like I have some place in my heart for it. And engaging with all these different types of stories and formats, if anything, just makes me love games even more. You know, like sometimes I think there's this idea that, oh, if games are your favorite thing, like, does that mean you only play games? And it's like, no, no, like I do a lot of things. I just really love games for like what they can offer and what they can provide, and I think it's really special.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's something that I hugely relate to, and that's something I really love when I'm thinking about, you know, my channel and the channels of others. Assassin's Creed is kind of the thing that has brought us together, you know, one way or another. And so I know for myself, like I always wish I could express more of my love for games other than Assassin's Creed. And so part of the thing that I always kind of, you know, selfishly and selflessly to different degrees try to like angle for in these chats is I want to hear about the games that the other games that people love. You know, like Assassin's Creed is cool. We love Assassin's Creed. We play other stuff as well. And I know that like some of us are aching to talk about it. And I think it's always a really fun experience.
Well, I mean, before we wrap fully, were there any other games that I know I'm the guest, but any other games you wanted to bring up or chat about?
Trying to think. Um Metroidvanias I did briefly mention, and survival
Yeah.
horror as well. I really,
Yeah.
really like good survival horror games. I think in
Hmm.
recent years they've become a little bit more popular than they have been before. Like they were a bit more niche as far as the greater constellation of gaming for most of my life. I mean, I obviously Resident Evil is a big name, but
Hmm.
if you were to talk to people, you know, get a bunch of people in a huge group, like do more of them play Call of Duty or do more of them play Resident Evil, I don't think it would be surprising like what the answer would be, right? Like it's some of these are a little bit more they cast a wider net, I guess you would say. But
Yeah.
survival horror games I have a huge amount of appreciation for because their design is like really just it clicks together really strongly in a way that just feels really elegant. Like, especially in more traditional survival horror games where you don't really have a shop and you don't really have like any fluctuating economy in the sense that you would think of. Like, you're not really making money or getting gold to like buy items with or whatever. There's not really anything like that going on. There's not really like an XP system or anything like that going on. Like all the resources in a survival horror game are it's a very like closed system. It's just whatever you happen to find in the world, and then whatever you use, you've used it. Whatever you manage to hold on to, you've held on to it. And I think one topic that is really close to my heart as far as like gaming overall is this idea of players hoarding items because what if I need it later? Right? And this is
Yeah.
something that is a very popular meme online, like one way or another, where it's like on occasion like you will see people post about this where it's like, oh, like I can't use this like super strong ultra powerful thing because what if I need it later, and then like they beat the final boss in credits roll and they haven't used it, right? I think players who are more willing to use items like actively have a lot more fun with certain genres. I think they have a lot more fun playing Soulslikes if they're willing to use their items. I think that playing survival horror games actually teaches you how to get out of that hoarder mindset because you
Hmm.
have no choice but to use items to keep yourself alive, because that's kind of what it's all about, right? Like in survival horror games, they're fundamentally like about resource management. You know, your choice is, do I consume ammo in order to put down this zombie, or do I consume healing to like shove past this zombie, take a bite, and you know, heal it, right? Like which resource are you willing to lose? And you're constantly like making this juggling act of sorts. And I think the more you play these kind of games, the better you get at like identifying and triaging out like which of these items is worth using now so that I don't have to lose more later. And I think that especially when it comes to you know, genres like Souls likes and like From's games in particular, That's something that is really, really special and appealing to me, is this idea of, if I'm playing a new Souls, like, Code Vein 2 is coming at some point next year, I assume. I'm pretty excited to try that out. And I just know that during exploration, which is frequently an aspect of these games that players kind of dislike a little bit more, like certainly it's something I'm always a little bit disheartened about. Like, I wish they would talk more about the exploration, but a lot of conversations end up just being about the boss fights. And don't get me wrong, I think Souls bosses are fantastic. They're popular and famous and iconic for a reason. But as someone who does really love DS1, and I would assume the same is true for you. Like, you probably value exploration in these worlds like significantly, right?
Definitely so. I
And
think that's what connects me so much to that first one. Yeah.
yeah, and so this idea of like you're in like a weird environment that is a little bit hard to understand. You're not really sure where is safe and where isn't, right? Like, you don't know if you aggro this monster, like, are you going to aggro like two or three more? Have you claimed enough like territory like earlier to like be able to retreat to and like fight them through a choke point? Can you collect them in a doorway and then like throw a firebomb at them, right? Like, these are the kind of decisions that, if you're making these kind of decisions, you're engaging with these games in a way that is very like, it's like another layer on top of like the rest of the gameplay that exists, and that makes you feel really, really cool. It makes you feel really smart and tactical. And I think that for that reason, it's something that I'm always like encouraging players to think about. And I think survival horror games are, in a way, kind of like a vaccine against this kind of item hoarder mentality, because
Mhm.
they enforce it basically one way or another. And then when I go back to playing something like Soulslikes afterward, and I'm thinking about these tough situations I'm in, the arithmetic of item use becomes very simple, because you know would I rather die and like go back to my bonfire and have to like retread all this ground and re-kill all these monsters, or am I happy to just shoot a few arrows at this archer like posted up on this ledge, or like throw a firebomb at like these two guys that are chilling right next to each other, right? Might as well get a bit of splash damage in before meleeing them down with my blade, right? Like, it's like these little decisions that just bring so much flavor and so much spice to these kind of games. And so yeah, that's a topic that I have to often rein myself in and stop myself from talking about, because I will go on forever.
But it's a fun one to talk about. I mean, it goes back to discussions on mentality and like how we encourage players to do certain things, and how that is a positive. Like, it's great when devs are able to do that, and it's great when there is some responsibility that devs decide they want to take on to say, let's make this something that is really pushed to the player to engage in this way. And I've always loved survival horror games also. Um, we talked about what kinds of games are accessible and things you would replay. Like, I must have replayed the Resident Evil 1 on the GameCube
Yes,
15 times. Like, I
because
played a lot of the original PS1 also, but on GameCube I played it so many times.
you can just smash out one of these games in like a few hours, right? Like, it's so
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah, like once you've really got it down, like I think my first playthrough of 2 was like for 2 on the PS1 was like
Hmm.
10 hours, 13 hours, and then I don't know if I would ever hit 3 again,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
3 hours playing these games because they become so ingrained even though you can do them in so many different ways. Like, I've um I like doing my knife only runs. I like doing my um different type of resource runs depending on what it is. People love randomizers. They love finding
Yes,
ways to
yes.
make these experiences unique again. And because of the nature of those games, there are ways to do that with a little finicking.
Hmm. I love that a
But that's
lot.
always very cool. Yeah. I know I had once made a video on The Last of Us 2 and just the fact that, like,
And it's stealth,
outside of
yeah.
discussion about other things, like the horror of it that is inherent in like that aspect where the survival horror component isn't something people always talk about because Last of Us is such a weird genre thing
Yeah.
where people wouldn't really call it a stealth game. You wouldn't really call it a horror game. Um, but it does have a lot of these mechanics. And like you were talking about, not hoarding things, the action heavier aspects of it, where it is built to have tense moments in
Yeah.
between times where you can sneak around. It really wants you to say, okay, put this thing together and throw it and get out of there.
Yeah, like The Last of Us, I think, is another one of those games that can potentially pull people out of that item hoarder mentality because, um, like some other, like most survival horror games, it does have moments where it will just like drag your items out of you because it's putting you in situations, especially if you get yourself detected, right? Like you are probably not staying alive if you're like so dead set on holding on to everything in your inventory. And, one of the ways that classic and traditional survival horror games like to do this is, during exploration phase, you're like collecting items and you're doing your best to hold on to as many of them as possible. And then the game puts a boss fight in your face to kind of like drain your items. And then once you beat the boss and your items have been taken from you, then you go back into exploration phase and you're like recollecting all your items again, right? And I think that's a very elegant structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's nice seeing games that find different ways to push you to do that, especially because, like I said, you play Resident Evil 1 15 times, you're probably not using many items anymore. You know
Yeah.
where to go at every point. Like you're not shooting randomly. But the first time you do, like when you don't know what's around the corner, when you don't know what's coming next, it is such a different experience. And I think it is very impressive that so many survival horror games, especially Resident Evil, just because they're an easy one to point to, but a lot of games like that, like Dead Space and
Yeah.
Silent Hill in its own ways, how
Yeah.
they handle things, they do manage to make themselves games that are not just built around being tense the first time, but are built around saying there is a lot of fun to be had playing this over and over again.
Yeah, I love that. It's something I wish more games would do, and it's something that I think not enough games pay special attention to, right? Like it's what again I lament the reactions from some players where a game will not be 100 hours long, and they'll be like, this is worthless, right? And it's like if you played a Capcom game, like you would explode because like it's not about being like this super drawn out experience. Like it's about giving you an enjoyable experience to play more than once. And I can totally understand how this mindset arises because a lot of games don't bother to do so, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's also why I
Definitely.
I really like and really encourage players to like I encourage players of so there's this trifecta I have in my head, which is like Souls-like, Metroidvania, and survival horror. And if a player enjoys one of them, I try to encourage them to play the other two because there's so much overlap in how their worlds are structured and the way exploration is done, and all of those. And I think it's really, really cool. And, lo and behold, each of those to varying degrees are games that, you know, they give you a different kind of fun on subsequent playthroughs after your first, and they all rely to a great extent on this idea of your first time playing, um, you lack knowledge, right? Like you don't know what's around the next corner, and so because of that, that's actually changing your decision making. But then after you have played them once and you do have an idea of what's around the next corner, now you're doing different kinds of decision making that is, you know, equally entertaining, but in a different way. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, just creating these experiences that are very long lasting, like the ones we've discussed. We talked about Metal Gear before. Again, those are other games that you
Yeah.
can just keep playing
Yeah.
over and over again, and they continuously have that fun factor. So, but it's something that does make so much sense in terms of just the mentalities that you have when you play them. And I think it does help people learn to play new games when they can find those connections, because sometimes it can be hard to decide you want to try something new if you don't identify what aspects of what you already like can
Yeah.
also be found in those.
Yeah. It's just interesting as well too. Like, what are the differences between standing up from a bonfire, getting out of a safe room, and choosing to expedition out to like a point in the map and engaging with things in this very like deliberate manner, right? Like there are differences and there are also similarities. And I think that's really, really cool. And it's something that, if you like it in one game, it can help you enjoy it even more in like the other games. And that's one of the things that makes me really happy that I do play these three genres, as much as I do.
Yeah. And I think they're all three genres that can connect you to the artistry in video games that can only exist in video games.
Yeah, yeah.
That type of exploration, that immersion, that putting you in a position of being allowed to figure things out for yourself. I
Mm-hmm.
think all three of those really do dig into that and kind of put you in the shoes of the character in ways that you can't do in non-interactive mediums. So I
Yeah.
can understand why those would be the three that really connect with you.
And one particular aspect of them that I think is really cool, I don't remember where I read this, but there was this idea of, exploration is meaningful gameplay, even if you suspect there's something around the corner and there isn't. Because the way your mind and your hands like tense up in preparation for that, like that is meaningful gameplay, even though nothing materially happened, right? Because it alters your decision making, it alters your behavior, like, and I think that's really, really, really cool. And there's not a lot of games that, you know, can give you that feeling. Like if I'm playing something like Assassin's Creed or whatever, I just pop my Eagle Vision, I see everything that's like in front of me. That's very different from playing something like, I don't know, Dark Souls or, Bloodborne or Sekiro, and like fighting an enemy, I'm being very cognizant to just like not push ahead too far or to like not disrupt more of the area around me, because what if I draw more enemies to fight me at the same time? This is not a combat system where, you're very comfortable being attacked by like four different dudes from different directions at once, right? Like
Yeah.
it's something you actually care about, and it makes you read space in such an intentional way. And that's that kind of texture and that kind of like friction is something I wish Assassin's Creed was more comfortable doing. And I don't really know how to square that with the fact that the I don't know, the audience Assassin's Creed targets like may not appreciate that very much. And that in itself feels like a little bit of a, I don't know, like I'm being too lenient on the series, because why not, right? Like what's stopping that from being the case? Provided a game is really, really good, you can encourage and you can reward and motivate that kind of gameplay. It doesn't, like, I think there's this tendency for players to see friction and be like, this is bad, right? Or this is more boring. But like that's not necessarily the case. Like there are ways to make it really fun. There are ways to make it feel good. You're not just having things taken away from you. You're being given things as well.
Mhm. And I don't know if this is just my own observation, my own perspective, and just what I happen to be exposed to, but I did feel like there was a long period in the 2010s, especially, and like in the early 2020s, I suppose, where there was a premium put on games that were very handholdy.
Yes,
And that's
yes.
certainly not to say that that's what all games were, but a lot of games felt like they were kind of regressing to that, where
Yeah,
maybe they'd give more cutscenes than before, but they would limit the mechanics a little more
yeah.
than they had in the past. And it does feel like things are changing today. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very recently.
even just thinking, yeah, yeah, even just thinking about how certain audiences react to like a very traditional Japanese game that's full of menus and full of all these different things that you have to consider, that you could find people actively making fun of, in very public spaces in the 2010s.
Yeah.
That
Now it's
now
like a
are
little bit
starting
more
to become
uncool to do that.
normalized.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah. Um, and just acceptance of things that aren't just go down this hallway and fight these guys. And there's space for those games too. There's a lot of space for games like that.
yeah.
But the fact that I was playing Elden Ring right before this, like I said, and I got off that to talk here.
Yeah.
And you think about Demon Souls or even Dark Souls 1, right? Um, Going up to the Taurus Demon after fighting something like Melania or even something much easier like Moog,
Yeah.
you can't put Moog in Dark Souls 1. In
No.
2011, people aren't going to play that game. They're just going to buy something else, right?
Yeah.
But, the culture has adapted. People have become acclimated to these kinds of games, and there's a certain friction that people are willing to accept now that they definitely weren't 10 years ago. And
That's a really
we'll
good
just have to
point.
see where that continues to go.
Yeah, and I think what's really instructive about that for me is just that it means it is possible to acclimate players through iteration like that. Like imagine if a series like Assassin's Creed, could have introduced progressively increased friction to like allow players to become more comfortable over time with a game that is a little bit more intentional, a little bit more demanding, right? Like if it had given itself, you know, that opportunity to do that over year, right? I think that would have been we could have been seeing a very different type of series by now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely would be very different. And again, I'm not trying to disparage this aspect of it because I'm glad progress is being made. But right now we're in a position where it's like you can eject, you can do a side eject again
Yeah.
in a way that's more consistent, and it's like that's great. But you just look at these different timelines of trying to return to AC1 versus trying to build
Yes.
20 years after
Yes.
AC1. Like, what would that look like if every year somebody was trying to make this better?
Yeah.
Versus in 2025, we're kind of in this position, through no fault of what Bordeaux is doing, of how can we just get as close to that as possible with what we've been given here?
Yeah, and it's why for such a long time I've had this belief and this desire that I don't just want to go back to AC1. I want to see something that is better than AC1, and it's so difficult for a lot of us to like conceptualize that in our head because Assassin's Creed has not had very much interest in delivering anything like close to that. It's just been sidesteps or you know in some regards downgrades, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and because of that it's very difficult to like envision and to hold in your mind. But that is what I want. Like if I were to be asked by someone like right now, like, hey, do you like what do you think the best parkour system is like in Assassin's Creed? And I would just say like the best parkour system in Assassin's Creed doesn't exist yet,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like they haven't made it. Like they've never given themselves the chance to make it.
Yeah, I think I had said something in my Unity video along the lines of, and I say it understanding that, I haven't dug into it as much as some other people, but when I look at the problems I have with it, whether it's the fact that I feel like it's overly automated, the fact that I feel like, unlike the early games, Arno doesn't feel as fully built for his environment
Yeah.
in terms of the animations he has and the way it's structured. Um, like all of the problems that I have with that system, if you combine them all and you address them all and you fix every single one, I just don't think that the result you'd get can really be called Unity system anymore. Like that's just a totally different thing at that point because
Yeah.
so many of those things are so deeply ingrained in how that game functions.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, that's why I'm always maybe hope is the wrong word to use, but certainly I have a high degree of curiosity for the future of Assassin's Creed. I'm very curious about what Hexe is going to do because
Yeah.
it's coming from a studio that has had a long time to think about these things, that has done an amount of signaling that, you know, they've heard this, but who knows what that will lead to because
Mm-hmm.
by looking at their previous game like Valhalla, it doesn't actually, you know, inspire a huge amount of confidence. But the fact that the game is letting itself allegedly be very different, I think is a good sign because it means that they have like a fresh slate for what it's worth to
Yeah.
try things with.
Yeah. I may be referencing my age too often. I'm obviously not that old, so anyone older than us might be a little frustrated by that. But I think one of the nice things about being a little older than some other people in the space is that curiosity is an easy thing to feel in
Yes.
a lot of places, right? Like
Yes.
I'm not jumping to defensiveness or anger in a way I might have if I were 15 years old and I had so many ideas about what this needs to be, and if it's not that, then I'm just going to be, so upset
Yeah.
with what comes out, right? Like, I'm able to see Assassin's Creed as it is. This is probably the least I've enjoyed Assassin's Creed in a while, which is interesting because, like, a lot of people were angry about things when Valhalla came out, but I had mentioned in one video or another, like, up until recently, I had never really not cared for 2 games in a row. Every time there was a game I kind of didn't really like, usually the next one brought me back in.
Yeah, and it makes an impact that like we do play, a lot of games that release contemporaneously with these Assassin's Creed games, like how
Yeah.
it's I really hate to like say it this way because I know it's probably gonna like irritate some people, but like how can you play something like Elden Ring and then you play something like a modern Assassin's Creed game and just like not see all the flaws, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like using words like deserve in a title, I can understand why some people might feel that strange, but
mhm.
when it comes to the time that a player wants to put into these games, um, versus the quality of what comes out, there is this realization that there is so much out there that is innovating in ways that Assassin's Creed has had the potential to, but at so many junctures has decided not to
Yeah, it
do.
just consistently chooses not to. Yeah.
Mhm. And I think Shadows especially made me feel a little sad. And I hope I, I haven't been talking. I said at the beginning I try not to be too negative, but I feel like I've talked more about the struggles I've had with the series than the positives, despite me liking so many of them so much.
Yeah.
But a part about Shadows that really disappointed me was that I did like Odyssey and I did like Syndicate, because even if those were 2 games that didn't build off of what came before especially well, I could tell if there was a piece of content in either of those games, the devs put it there because they thought it would be fun
Yeah.
and they thought it would fit the time period, and they thought this is a cool thing. Let's have the player do this here.
Right.
And so to have that, to have their version of Syndicate's London, whether it's the version some people might have wanted or not, to have their version be fleshed out to that extent, to have classical Greece fleshed out to the extent that Odyssey does it, enough to build this community of people who love to explore it, to then get Shadows where, like, if you want to max out your level in some ways, you've got to go to like 50 churches and clap your hands in front of each shrine, and that's all you do.
Not
Like, there's
exactly the most
nothing.
riveting gameplay. Yeah.
Yeah, like how many of the activities you can do in Shadows are press a button at this white dot,
Yeah. And
you
it's
know?
it's one of those things that is very much the opposite of what I refer to when I talk about Capcom games or like DMC or Resident Evil, where rather than being something that gains and appreciates in value when you replay it, something like Shadows like feels worse the more times you play it because you're putting yourself through those like activities that like they lose their luster the first time you do them.
Yeah. Yeah, like there's any point after that. And I mean, people make fun of AC2 and the feathers, and I think it's perfectly fine to make fun of AC2 and the feathers.
Yeah.
It's
But at least
it's
they're
its own
like
thing there.
discrete little movement challenges that you still have to like reach in the world using your parkour, right? Like at least
They
there's
are.
that.
And there's 100, and 100 at face value can sound like a lot, but every area's got like 20,
Yep.
and you're comparing that to some modern games where it's like collect like how I don't know how many collectibles are in Valhalla, but I know it's a lot more than
A
100,
lot. Yeah.
you know. Um and
And
just so that I don't dig into the negative there, like playing Syndicate, if I want to just go to the fight club, if I want to ride a carriage around, I can see the Thames and there's cool stuff to do there. There are all these different types of side missions from different historical figures. I can get into a gang war. Like, I don't know that everybody likes those things, but there is stuff to do in that world that isn't, click on the dot.
yeah.
And that's why I loved 4 so much. I think 4 does such a great job of that in terms of just realizing the setting it was given. And I think if you're going to go a different direction, Brotherhood made a lot of sense with how it did it, where that's not necessarily the setting that they're aiming for there, but the narrative itself. We are trying to very specifically take down Templar presence in this region. Every single thing you can physically do in this game,
Is about
other
that.
than grab that flag, I guess. You could kind of argue the flag grabbing is something there, but it's not really. But
Yeah.
everything else, everything you're actually doing, like there aren't really side stories in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. If you're doing something, you are killing a Templar, you are taking down a Borgia tower, you are taking down this cult of people who hang out underground with their wolf masks. Like
Yep.
everything means something to the plot. And I
Yes.
think there's a lot of value in that. And Assassin's Creed has consistently showcased that they can do that aspect of it.
Yeah, and they've
So
like
it's a
kind of
little
veered
disappointing when they
away
don't.
from doing that. Yeah, which is yeah, I missed that as well. It's part of what I mean when I say I wish the series had more focus. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree
And
on
there's a
both
lot of
those
good
fronts.
stuff.
And
There's a lot of good stuff that Shadows does. Like I think stealth in that game pushes back on the player more meaningfully than like most of the stealth systems across the series.
I 100% agree. Yeah. And I know you dig into stealth in a different way than I do, but like I do love stealth games, and you know, I did very much appreciate the attempt to do different things, cuz I feel like stealth is something that had remained very stagnant for a long time.
Yeah.
And so to have Mirage do what it does in its own way, to have Shadows do what it does in its own way, I do appreciate that that is something that they're trying some new things with.
Mm-hmm. All right, how are we feeling?
I feel good.
I,
Again,
yeah.
very glad we were able to chat here.
I feel pretty good too. I always enjoy these. I have to say this is probably one of my favorite ones that I've done in a really long time.
That is very kind of you. I honestly was, I was unsure if I should be like researching things before I chat with you. I was unsure if like there were other things I should be cognizant of or thinking about, but I figured, if we're going to talk, it would just be about stuff we already have opinions on, stuff we already know. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that you found the conversation to be a positive one, because I definitely enjoyed being able to chat with you about all these things.
Awesome. I'm really glad. Yeah, that's a big part of my goal is like hopefully my guest has fun and enjoys themselves, right? Like so I hope you did and I'm glad you did.
Yeah. Yeah, I won't lie. Like when I got here, there were nerves, as there are with anything else.
Hmm.
Um, because we haven't spoken verbally before, and I wasn't sure how this would go.
Yeah.
But I really appreciated the topics, and yeah, those nerves went away very quickly. So
I'm really glad. Yeah, it's something that I always look forward to and one of my favorite things is just like finding that common ground and like being able to share, a little bit of back and forth about just things that we find cool and things that we found meaningful. And my
mhm.
favorite moments are those times where like, it turns out unexpectedly that like you're into some game that I also enjoy or whatever, and I couldn't have guessed. And you know, learning that you like Devil May Cry and like action games and Soulslikes always gonna be huge for me because it's something that I don't
Yeah.
often get the opportunity to bring up on my own channel, and
Hmm.
it's something that I'm hugely passionate about, but that I just don't often get to talk about. So that was awesome.
Yeah. Well, I was really glad that we were able to talk about those other games too. Um, I'm a pretty available person most of the time, so if there were ever anything else you needed, anything that you wanted to chat about, or just anything else going on at all, you always have different ways to reach me.
Awesome. Yeah, I will definitely be messaging you about various things I find cool or curious in the future for sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It would be very cool to talk about, more non-Assassin's Creed things too, in addition to Assassin's Creed things, because of course I wouldn't talk about it if I didn't like talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
can see us doing this again sometime. Once we have more news on the series and what it's doing.
Well, I would be more than happy to if that ever happens.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for joining me. For everyone who's listening, please check out So Says Jay. The channel will be linked in the description and the pinned comment, presumably. And yeah, like, thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining me.
Of course, thank you for having me here. It was really a great time.